Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to yet another episode of the show. Tonight, we're going to go into social aspects, religion, government, society. I'm sure everybody has known or at least heard a little bit about what's happening over in Kentucky, where we have a clerk of courts who is refusing to issue marriage licenses in protest to go against gay marriage, citing religious beliefs and saying that it's not morally right and against her good conscience. Joined here tonight by a couple of folks, some of them from the gaming community, but pretty much they're everyday people who are in different walks of life, different parts of the country, and in some cases the world, or been in different parts of the world. And we're all going to lend our perspectives into this. We're all going to be respectful, but we're going to be as objective as we possibly can in discussing each perspective. So we have here, I'm joined by Acer, joined by Krusty, joined by Teacher Kirby, and I'm joined by Tank, or known as Tankia for some circles. So thank you all for coming tonight. Let's get the show on the road. So we have here the clerk of courts who is now going to jail after given multiple opportunities to say, look, you're elected to this position, do your job. And she has been steadfast in not issuing marriage licenses because she opposes homosexual people from getting married. For whatever reason, that's her belief, and she is taking her belief and now imposing it in a government position of power. First off, from the panel here, right, wrong, indifferent, what's up?
Well, if somebody else wants to go first, go ahead.
Well,
I was just going to say wrong. Sorry.
I mean, technically, since she's in an elected position, there's the separation of state and church, so she's supposed to, from the get-go, basically keep her personal religious beliefs separate from doing what is her elected duty, if that's the case. So, technically, legally speaking, wrong, and then with the Supreme Court's decision, wrong again.
Okay, here's my oops. Okay, here's my view as a Christian. And historically speaking, for thousands of years, marriage was a religious institute, not a political one. It's always been a man and a woman in every religion around the world. She was elected to that position before the Supreme Court decided to change the definition of what is holy matrimony. So it's not her fault that the rules changed while she was in office. And I commend her for standing her ground on what she's not condemning anybody, she's just not taking part in it. She doesn't believe that it's the government's position to change what is a religious institution of marriage. It's holy matrimony through God. If they want to have a legal binding document, call it something else. Don't throw religion into it. It's not marriage. It's a legal agreement, that's fine.
Okay, but you're putting religion into what's being regulated by the government. Religion doesn't give marriage licenses. Governments do. And that's what she's working for. She's working for the government. The government has defined marriage a certain way, regardless of what religion says, because religion in this country is separate from the government. We've based a lot of our laws on what the majority of what is Christian beliefs, but that does not mean that our laws are only based on that and have to remain that way. You're talking about a state law, a state representative, and the rules for what the state defines as a legally government recognized marriage has changed.
Okay, but the state didn't decide that. The federal government did. Some states voted for it, some states voted against it, and the administration said, no, everybody has to agree. The people in many of the states voted statewide, yes or no, on their own before the federal government decided to get involved. That's why it's 50 states of America, not federal government of America. We're supposed to be able to decide what we believe in each state.
True. Part of the reason that the federal government went and ruled on it was because the states did have different reasons for it, and you had situations where you could be married in Kentucky and not married in Virginia. And so what's the deal? There needed, I feel personally, there needed to be some kind of uniform thing. We all agree that we're one country, so we need to have one definition of what is marriage in that case.
Not really. We're the melting pot. So we have many different cultures. I'm sure Japanese immigrants and Chinese immigrants, Mexican immigrants, all become American citizens, all have different views on this. You don't force one cookie cutter plan on everybody. Some states you can get married at 16, some are 18. Some states you let people drink at 18. Some say not till you're 21, but you can die for your country at 18. Each state sets their boundary. The reason I left California and will never go back is because I disagreed with that way of life. Many of the ways of life out there. I came to a conservative state to get away from that stuff. I should have that right to get away from whatever I disagree with. I'm not going to go tell them how to live, but I don't want them coming here to tell me how to live.
The main thing with like the whole marriage thing is a lot of people, are saying it's for love or whatever, but what it really comes down to is you look at the court cases, it is that the one spouse wanted to be able to legally have their name on their other spouse's stuff. It is all governmentally controlled. It's all things regulated by the courts and basically just tied up with what taxes and assets come out. I mean, religion aside, most people, one of the benefits of being married, religion aside, is, you do get certain tax incentives. You do get certain incentives to be married. You don't have to be. You can function just fine without it. But most, like the court cases that I may be exactly wrong on some of the facts, but I believe one of the court cases that initiated the whole Supreme Court decision was that a man wanted to have his name on his significant other's death certificate, but wasn't allowed to because they weren't married, and that's what triggered one of many of the class action suits to go up to the Supreme Court. So it is understood that marriage is a religious construct, but also if you go back deep enough, it's also basically in some cultures a contract saying, here, you own my daughter. And that's how it was for a while, and it's evolved past that, and we're just kind of more or less reaching another spot where it's going to start rapidly evolving that definition again.
You brought up a good point there, because historically marriage has been more of a political arrangement between families to solidify their power and their interests as well as their assets. Love was an afterthought. Love was like, okay, you two will grow to quote unquote love each other later on in life when you mature. When people said, you know what, I don't feel like marrying this other person just to acquire wealth or property or status. I want to be able to marry this person because I feel deep emotional ties to this person. That's when you start to see marriage evolve. Whether it involved a religious ceremony or not depended on the region and what was popular at the time. Over time, the ceremony tied in with religion. but it was still recognized by a government entity. You had to be graced by either the king or whoever your lord was, if you were talking about medieval Europe, before you could get married. Before the pope or a priest could perform the ceremony, you had to be allowed by a government entity to get married. That was it. In India, in China, in Japan, in most of the Asian continent, you were married because you were there to offer up a bond to solidify political power or wealth. Later on, love played a part into it. So to say that it's always been that way, it isn't the case. Now, it evolved later on to include religion, to include love. So yes, that's there, but we have to look at the history of the entire institution of marriage as a whole, where we saw it go from acquisition of power and wealth to consolidation of power and wealth to a revolution of sorts where two people can actually be emotionally free and in some cases sexually free, and where you had several different cultural events that sort of steered it towards a religious ceremony, whether it's something very serious or something more aloof and festival, but it became a part of it. It was interwoven into it. What we're looking at here now is not just a, well, we're going to force religious institutions to recognize same-sex couples as being married. That's not what's happening here. What's happening here is that one group of people is being denied a fundamental right that everybody else gets to enjoy, and that group of people are not doing anything wrong. But when I say not doing anything wrong is their life, aside from choosing who they want to be with, any different from you or I? And if the answer to that is no, then they should not be denied the same fundamental rights that you and I and other straight people, heterosexual people, enjoy. So if we have a system where we are denying one group of people the same rights that we get to enjoy because they have done nothing that is against the normal everyday living and the normal, what we would consider normal societal behavior, where if you look at them as an individual and they go to work, they follow the laws that cause no harm to people, they don't want to break any sort of unjust law that would cause some sort of corruption in society. They want to be able to enhance the society that they live in. Then they shouldn't be denied any rights. Period.
Well, there's more to it than just that. It's if they have a legal union to where they can have the same insurance together and share the same benefits and all that, that's fine. But calling it a religious term, marriage, offends people who have a religious belief. You're taking something that is holy to them and turning it into something that is people, if you're Christian, so to speak, you feel that that's sin, right? The way of life. And then you're taking a religious term of holy matrimony and applying it to sin. That's like saying, well, just because the government legalized murder doesn't mean that we're going to acknowledge that either. We
Well,
just don't want to
Well, but
partake in
that's
it.
assuming that marriage is only religious. Marriage is, and I think that's the point or the crux of this, is that marriage, the term marriage is not just a religious term. It does not just mean joined in the eyes of God. It means it means a recognized and officially recognized, whether it be by God or by a government, union between two individuals.
I think part of the issue at hand here also is that we've seen elements of this in history, in our very recent history in America, where we would have certain groups of people could not marry other groups of people based off of an arbitrary factor such as skin color. Is that right now? Is that okay now? People look at that and say, well, of course that's preposterous. Why would they do something like that? Who would think of something like that there? Well, here's the same situation. Instead of them marrying somebody of the opposite sex, they're marrying somebody who have shared the same sex with them. Are they causing any harm to anybody? Are they doing something that would be a detriment to society? Is it something that they're imposing on other people? Are they going to somehow degrade the quality of life within that society that they live in? If the answer to those are no, then why should they be denied the same rights that other people enjoy?
Well, it depends on the culture of the people around them. Like, I don't want to be perceived as a bigot or a jerk. I don't care what other people do away from me. I really don't care. Just don't bring it into my environment. I don't want to see it in my street, my neighborhood. I don't want my children seeing it. To me, that's a sinful way of life, and that's just my belief. I understand everybody has their own. That's fine. But it's getting to the point where it's being forced for everybody to accept it, not just in the courtroom, but, like that baker that's getting fined tens of thousands of dollars had to shut down their business and everything because they wouldn't make a gay wedding cake because they're Christian. Well, that's like going to a restaurant and demanding, you're in a Muslim restaurant, demanding a pork sandwich. You going to fine them and shut them down because they refuse to make you a pork sandwich? I mean, really. It's fine if you do what you want, just don't force everybody else to get involved.
Well, I wanted to actually touch on that other one there where we had a baker who is being fined because, and I honestly think they were being targeted by a specific group. Where they're being fined for not baking a quote-unquote gay cake. As I understood the story based off the sources that I saw here, and I'm just taking the sources that I see as factual until I can find something else that disproves it. This person was of a strong religious belief to the point that they wouldn't make any Halloween-themed cakes. They wouldn't make any Easter Bunny type of theme cakes, none Santa Claus or anything else other than a nativity scene for the cake. So this was something that this person deeply holds as a religious belief and actively practices it. So to that I say, okay, that's what you do. Good, you're protected to do that. Where he is saying, look, I don't want to make a custom cake because that's going against my religious beliefs, but here are other cakes that you can use and purchase and that you can have on your wedding. And that to me is a reasonable offer. And to where I say, if they're really trying to push a case where they're trying to force this guy to make a cake custom for them, and he's saying, no, I can't do that, but I will give you this other service here that is not a significantly lesser quality of service than what he would offer. Then I would say that's very reasonable of him to do, and he should not be sued.
Yeah, the family in question actually offered him 2 other places to get their cake from, and the couple that wanted the cake agreed to that and thought it was okay. It was the I forget the name of the group that pushed the issue, and they actually had to shut their business down 2 weeks ago. They closed the doors.
Yeah, now something like that doesn't help the overall problem here. Where if this is America, this is sold as the melting pot of the world, where we have multiple cultures as supposed to be able to coexist with each other. And we grow from the diversity that we bring to the table. And it's not just diversity, oh, look, it's a catchphrase, a buzzword, ooh, it's going to be cool. No, our different experiences actually bring different perspectives of looking at a problem and coming up with solutions for them. And that we build on top of each other's perspectives and solutions to make a better society. So with that said, if those two people initially said, okay, I won't do this, but here's two other places, they're in a very close proximity to where I am, check them out, I'll give them a call and see what we could do with it. And they say, yes, I agree with it, the problem was solved. The problem was solved. This family shouldn't have been sued out, and these other people here should have got a cake and moved on. Granted, if that person said they didn't want to celebrate their lifestyle, bad on you, but okay, you know what? Welcome to America. You have your own opinion. Great. Okay, you weren't being denied service. You were even being helped. But it's still a gray area, but I'm going to lean towards them not being sued and not being shut down.
Right, and I agree with that. You shouldn't have been sued. You have the right to refuse service as a private business, and that goes right back to what we started on, where the woman denying the marriage licenses is not a private business, and
yes.
She does not have the right to refuse that service.
Right, but the rules changed while she was in office. She didn't know they were going to change. She took the job, did the job for many years, and then all of a sudden they flipped the rules around. That's not her fault. You know, they should say, hey, give her the option to resign and they'll get somebody else in.
Yeah, she has the option to resign.
She has the option to resign.
She chose not to take that option.
Exactly. She has the option to resign, not the option to not do her job, which was part of her job description is to enforce and comply with the laws that have been passed both by the state and federal government.
The state there never passed that. The federal
government did, yes.
Okay, that's where the problem's coming up in many states. A lot of states, I believe it's 36 of them or something, I don't know, a bunch of them, 22, it's a crazy amount. But anyways, a lot of them voted that they didn't want that in their state. So now it's a conflict of federal versus state regulation. Is the federal government going to dictate everything for everyone, everywhere? Or do states have any rights anymore?
States have the rights so long as they do not oppress the individual citizens' liberties. Once that has been encroached, then the federal government should come in and say, nope, the law should be applied equally to everybody. If they want to enter a contract that says that these two assets from these two people are now joined as one, they should do so. Here is your marriage certificate. You are now recognized in 50 states. Because if your marriage from state A is not recognized in state B, but other people's marriages are, that's a problem, and that needs to be addressed.
Now, okay, you're saying rights infringed upon. So that 10% of American society that they did a poll survey, whatever I heard, and it was like 10% of Americans recognize themselves as gay or lesbian. Now they're forcing that view on 50 states. Now the half the states or whatever, say there's 50-50. Half the states that have a majority that don't embrace that view aren't going to San Francisco and forcing them to not allowed to have it. It's San Francisco going to, say, Oklahoma, trying to tell us how to live. Oh, you need to open your door to all the gays. No, you're not opening your door to Christianity. We're not opening our door to gays. So you stay where you are, we'll stay where we are, and you live your life your way, we'll live our life our way. Why can't it just be like that?
Well, then we have regions of the country where you have the majority of people who would think one way, and then people in a different region will think this way here. And that does happen. That realistically happens in this country. You know, that's where the term the Bible Belt came from, where you have a lot of evangelical Christians moving into this area of the country, and they have a very strong presence there.
Right, which is why I moved here, to get away
That,
from that way of life. You know, the whole gangs and drugs, and I didn't go to Nevada because I didn't like the idea of pornography and gambling. I didn't go to Frisco because I don't like the idea of gays. That's fine. Everybody should be able to live the way they want where they live. I came here to get away from it all, and now it's being forced down our throats too.
now, here's what I would like to understand this very carefully. Where do you feel that is being forced down upon down your throat? Where two people who say they love each other and they want to spend the rest of their lives with each other should receive a certificate that states that the federal government and all states should recognize this union. How is that being forced down upon your throat? Honestly want to understand this.
Because if you believe that those are sinful ways of life, opening the door to bringing in that whole thing, next thing you know, you got people dressing the way they do in Frisco. People dressing up like fairies and dancing down the streets, having their festivals and their ceremonies. Well, basically, they're forcing that's an option in their grade schools. They're teaching that in sex education, that's an optional way of life. We don't want to teach our children that. We don't want,
But you can't
if you
deny
lived
its
in Vegas,
existence.
you would have to accept that prostitution is fine. And that's a normal way of life. Well, I won't teach my daughter that that's okay either, so I'm not going to have her around that either. We should be able to decide where to live based on our beliefs. If we want to live somewhere quiet, peaceful, and religious environment, we should be able to have that without the intrusion of the federal government forcing our beliefs to change.
But they're not forcing your beliefs to change. They're not saying that you cannot believe that a man and a man should not be married. They're not saying you can't believe that. What they're saying is that the federal government is going to legally recognize those unions. And to me, there's a huge difference between the two. You can still think that it's wrong and are free to say that it's wrong and are free to express that viewpoint and to teach your children that if that's what you want to do. That is part of freedom in this country. But that doesn't mean that you have the right to say, but because I believe that, you can't get married because you're two men or two women.
Well, I think the one thing is kind of backpedaling a little bit is when defining the term marriage, I think what a lot of people in general forget is that we apply the English word marriage to other societies that it's something that's close to it. So it's like, oh, you two got together, that's what we call marriage. And since we speak English, that's what we now see as marriage, even though it is probably really fundamentally different than what would be considered a Christian, union. Because I mean, if you know, especially with like Asian and the Middle Eastern cultures, like up until recently, a lot of marriages were basically bartering, contracts of, give me 3 goats, you can marry my daughter. Our families are now one, and we're all rich and we're all happy. I think we some of us were sitting on TeamSpeak the other night, and we had this discussion where we were talking about Disney movies, and this is kind of a little bit of a sidetrack, but the movie Mulan is kind of an interesting thing because in the Chinese culture at the time, women had 0 rights, basically were just pretty little objects to have kids with. And there's a scene where, after, the Huns invade and they're attacking the palace or whatever, and, she reveals that she was the soldier from the mountain, the Hun guy's reaction is just like, it's you. It's not, oh my god, it was a woman. And that was because in Hun society, women had all the rights in the world, and in many cases were equal to men, even to the point that they could marry and divorce who they wanted and who they thought was fit. So, I mean, I think the one thing is that we're applying the term marriage to a vast majority of unions across the entire planet, and as a melting pot, we kind of have to accept that there's a lot of different type of unions that wouldn't be considered the Christian version of marriage, and that we mislabeled probably what that is a long time ago, and now we're just suffering the consequences from it, if that's the case for a lot of people.
I agree with that definition issue. Um, Realistically, very few religions actually discuss in their scripture marriage. Christianity is one of them that does. It goes back to the Jewish, but yeah, you're right. The term does get a lot of societies mixed up.
Now, we can understand that some words, have the flexibility to evolve in its meaning. Others shouldn't, but we as a society end up using them as a slang term. My biggest pet peeve would be the use of hypothesis versus theory. When everybody said, well, here's my theory, they really mean, here's my guess based off of hopefully something that is either educated or looking at the circumstances of the situation and then taking these little pieces of information and adding it together here. A true meaning, a better word would be hypothesis, but it doesn't sound as smart. Theory makes you seem smart. So to that degree, marriage has come up as a very big, bold stance saying and meaning that this is the bond that will not be broken no matter what you do or who you are. We are going to join together and be as one entity, and nobody should take us apart. That's what marriage is, and that's what two people who want to be together want. And all they want to be is recognized by the governments, the individual state governments within the United States of America, so that if they get married in Washington State, they can move to Florida and the marriage is still valid. You do not need a separate piece of paperwork if you are a heterosexual couple that gets married in Washington and you move to Florida, your marriage is still recognized. The same people who get married in Washington want to move to Florida and have their marriage still recognized. That's it. And just looking at it from a law standpoint, that is their right as United States citizens. They've entered into that contract. It's been recognized by a state, and that state's rights should carry over to that entity now. And that entity should enjoy those rights as they move throughout the United States territory. And wherever the protection of the United States goes, so do those rights.
Okay. Yeah. What? Call it something else. A legal contract, a binding union. But then, I don't know. A lot of
But
Christians.
Why does it have to be called something else?
Because marriage means holy matrimony. That's the definition of marriage, and it's not a holy matrimony. And then they start forcing priests to start.
But that's not how it's.
Priests.
Well, hold on.
But
hold on one second. I'll let you in on this. Fine, we call it something else. Should it be banned? Call it a legally binding contract that says that these two people are now united and treated as a legal entity, one and the same. So if one goes in the hospital, the other one has the rights to say, that they are speaking as one half of that entity and now have the rights to be able to make a decision that could determine the life or death of their other half. They have the rights to the estate. They have the rights to be able to make any sort of life or death decision. They have the rights to be able to own property together. They have the rights to be able to adopt a child together. So long as we're agreeing on all those there, some people would not disagree with calling it a different name. It's still the same function.
Right. The fear for Christians is that starts getting forced into the churches, for like they're having the discussion in the Catholic churches now. I'm not Catholic, but they're discussing it now. Is the big fight is, are they going to be forced to give religious ceremonies to gay unions? And then it's going to start infiltrating into every aspect of Christianity. It's like, well, is the government going to start force? The fear is that they're going to force us to take part in all these ceremonies and all that stuff. That once you open one part of the station, you open the whole door and everything floods in.
Kirby, you were going to say something.
Yeah, well, first of all, I personally would have a problem with calling, a union between a man and a man or a woman and a woman something other than marriage. In this country, marriage has been defined not only as a religious union, but a legally recognized status by the government. The instant the government started regulating it, it became a legally recognized status. Whether it's the same word or not, whether it's what you believe marriage is in your religion or not, the second the government used the term marriage and said, we're going to issue a license and define what it is, it became a legally recognized state of being. And that means that it's no longer just holy matrimony, because it is 100% possible to get legally married and never have to go to a religious figure to do it. Okay? You can go to the court and get married by law and be married without having to go through the church. So to say marriage means holy matrimony, no, not in this country and not in this case. So then it comes down to, well, why do we have to have a different word for it? Yeah, I feel that we don't need a different word for it, and you're trying to I'm trying to figure out the word that I want to use here. You're trying to segregate based on it. Yeah, it may be the same thing, but to me it's ridiculous to have to try to find a different word for it. If that's what you're going to do. If it's the same thing, it's the same thing. Call it the same thing. And there are plenty of other people that, whether that's their attitude or not, they don't want to have to be, well, I don't want to have to do this. And Hawaii did something like that. I was from Hawaii. I used to live in Hawaii, where I did civil unions. Okay? You had all the same rights as a married couple, but you weren't married. They called it civil union. A lot of people took offense to that because you have to create a whole different thing. Well, why aren't I good enough to get married? Okay? Same thing.
But then they kind of be devil's advocate that also just, if they're the same thing, that just kind of almost, as weird as it sounds, it's almost like degrading the one to try to make the other sound shinier, which is almost just like an envy factor. So,
Right.
which is a human problem. I mean, that envy is always an issue, and like I said, or before, the problem was we pretty much locked ourselves into a hole based off of just translating things from English. And because, I mean, the thing is, technically, if they wanted to call it something else, they would have to reissue license for every single union in the country. And the amount of time and money that would go into that, and just stress and legal issues, would just be a bloody nightmare. Because, like I said, some of the cases came up where one spouse wanted to be able to have the legal rights to, like, pull the plug on their significant other or not let the plug be pulled on them. And, if you had to go through a whole re-up system of doing it, it would just be a nightmare, because our government clearly will never want to segregate one group from another ever again, with all the history and all the backlash that's ever caused. They're never going to be willing to do that again. And, as the general population, we have to accept that that's never going to happen again. So they're going to just have to kind of adapt things that are already there. And, the marriage term is basically what's being adapted for, the legal rights of being able to make decisions for your spouse. You got civil unions. I think a couple other states called them something else. It wasn't civil union. It was something weirder. I remember it was a long time ago. Maybe I'm crazy.
Something like domestic partnerships, where you would
Yeah,
have,
domestic partnerships.
Yeah.
yeah, you would
Right.
have heterosexual
Yeah.
couples go into these domestic partnerships because they did not want the religious ceremony for whatever reason. So they would
Yeah.
go into these domestic partnerships, and then they would still obtain a certificate of marriage.
And also,
So-
what is it? Common law marriage is another one where if
Mhm.
two people just live together long enough, they can go to the courthouse, stamp, there you go. Like, it's not like I'm not sure exactly how it works, but from my understanding, it's not like an marriage, but it's basically just considered they've lived long enough together. Obviously, they're with each other. Clap your hands.
Yeah, they would have to. They recognize that they would still have to jump through some loopholes, or not jump through
Right.
some legal laws in order to be able to have some benefits that married couple would have. But for all intents and purposes, they are recognized by society as being with each other, and that's there. But with this specific case here, and others like it, because we had to deal with the same thing down here in Florida, where you would have people who are in a position of power within the government, whether it's the government for services or government for making laws. And for one aspect or another, their religious beliefs are trying to be stamped or influencing to some degree the laws that they create. Now, my problem with this is that if anybody here, whether they be a Christian, Muslim, Sikh, whatever, Krishna, Jewish, I don't care. If one group decides to make a law that somehow excludes another group, that is wrong. And hopefully, some of the courts in reviewing this law will say, okay, this law should be removed because it's a violation of the Second Amendment, where we have an obvious influence of religion here, where they're trying to impose this specific religion upon others. Now, a lot of people who identify themselves as Christians would say that we do not want the federal government or the state governments to actually dictate which endorse a religion. Sorry, that's what I was looking for. They do not want to have a religion endorsed. And wisely so, because when you have one religion endorsed, then whoever the practitioner of that religion is that's writing the laws will write it that would benefit their own specific denomination of that religion. So if you have somebody who is a Latter-day Saint writing the laws, they will write some that would benefit the Latter-day Saints if they want to impose their religion, the religious laws upon everybody else. So if you are a Southern Baptist, or if you're a Lutheran, or if you are one of 32,000 other different denominations of Protestant Christianity, you may be excluded. You may see your own rights eroded or gone. You may be arrested because you are not following the doctrines of the Latter-day Saints at that point. And that's a very dangerous precedent to have. Because then what happens when they die and then somebody else comes into power? Then now the laws are shifted from Latter-day Saints to Southern Baptist laws, or they switch to Lutherans, or they switch to Catholics, or they're switched over to Sharia law. What happens then? Who's going to actually say, look, we need to make sure that there is a true separation between church and state. If you are going for a position of either service or power within the state or federal government, you will have your beliefs, but you should be able to separate your beliefs from the duty that you are either elected to or appointed to serve the general public. And that means that you will have a baseline set of laws that will apply universally to everybody, regardless of whatever faith you practice or no faith, whatever sexual orientation that you have or no sexual orientation, whatever your hair color is or no hair, whatever job you hold or no job, whatever education background that you have or no education. The law should apply to you equally across the board.
Yeah, there's even, as Americans, we believe that everybody should be able to choose whatever you want, do whatever you want. And the amendment to the Constitution states that freedom of religion states that anybody can worship any religion they want in this country, even the Satanic Church up in Detroit or whatever it is. Everybody has that freedom. That's fine. But I don't see them going to, say, a Muslim, Sharia church saying, hey, you have to marry gay people here. They'll get shot there. I mean, they'll be beheaded, whatever. That's a, in their belief, that's stoned to death or whatever. Which is
right.
Honesty,
And no one is saying they have to change their beliefs. No one is saying that a church that fundamentally believes that gay marriage is wrong and should not be allowed has to now start marrying every gay couple that comes in and says we want to be married. What this law says is that that gay couple can go to the state office, courthouse, city or county or whatever, wherever they have to go to get the legal piece of paper that gives them permission to be married, okay, and get that piece of paper. And then go to someone who is willing to marry them to perform the legal ceremony and allow them to be married. The law does not say that if I am a homosexual woman and I want to marry another homosexual woman, that I can go into your church and force your church to marry me and my lover. That is not what this law says.
and on top of that, if somebody's actually doing that, then they are no better than those people who are trying to oppress the rights of others. In that case, they're wrong. Period.
Exactly.
Well,
Exactly.
okay, you guys you're right on a lot of that, and I agree. It's all opinion. It's my opinion, your opinion, whatever. But the way Christians are seeing that the government is taking place right now, it's little steps, lots of little steps starting to force a change in what we've seen as hundreds of years of a Christian society. The majority of Americans are of Christian belief. And like the abortion thing, the gay marriage thing, all these little things are starting to be forced. Like they're forcing the nuns to, in California, the sisterhood or whatever, to be involved with the health insurance that offers abortion and all that. That's in court. You got the churches, and there's a church in Tennessee, I think it is, where they were trying to, I forget the details. I'm sorry, my memory's getting old. But anyways, there's a lot of little things that it feels like to Christians in America that we're slowly being forced to change our belief system. And the government's holding all the cards, driving it down our throats, what we're supposed to believe now. That this is okay and this is okay.
No one is But,
And
I mean, just because abortion is legalized does not mean that they're saying that you have to believe that abortion is okay. You can still believe that abortion is not okay and that you would never do it or condone it for anybody
by
that in
paying
your
for
family or in your life.
no, by paying for health insurance that covers that, that is against. You're pitching in for sin. You're being forced to buy
How am I
insurance.
pitching in for sin?
Okay, everybody has to buy insurance.
But I don't have to
Everybody
utilize
has
it.
to buy
But
coverage.
I don't have to utilize the abortion.
No, but you have to pay for it. I have to buy the joint,
I
but
don't
I'm
have
not
to pay for
smoking it.
your abortion.
Yes, you
If
do.
your wife had an abortion, I don't have to pay for your wife's abortion. I'm paying for
You-
my medical insurance that covers my medical needs. I'm not paying for your wife's medical insurance. I'm not paying her copay. I'm not paying her appointments. I'm not paying her doctor's fees. I'm paying my medical insurance fees for my care that I receive.
I think what he's trying
If
to
I don't
say
believe
is that through the taxes,
I don't have
through
to
whatever
utilize it.
fees that you have to pay, is being distributed around so that everybody equally participates in this, and so each of us would equally receive whatever the bare minimum benefits are. And since the bare minimum benefits would include some form of birth control, and that is against his religion, that he feels is wrong, and he should not participate in that. Did I catch that?
Basically, the birth control we don't care about. The abortion we care about, because that's to a Christian, to most Christians, it's considered murdering children. And we're being forced to pay the premiums. Everybody pitches in on the premiums to get the health insurance rates the way they are. That's the way the system works. And so everybody's being forced to pay for abortion, whether you believe in it or not.
Well,
And
let
whether
me
you
bring
use
this.
it or not,
So
you're
get an
pitching in.
insurance plan that doesn't cover it.
We're not
Well,
allowed
get an
by
insurance
federal law.
plan that
Obamacare dictates that all people, all employers, all insurance has to cover abortion.
The plan does need to be modified to be able to have things that you don't need as far as a service. Like some people really don't need mental health care. Later on, they should have the option to add it should something happen to them that will require mental health care. I don't need to pay for health care that would give me ultrasounds in case I'm pregnant because unless something changes with me genetically and very rapidly, I don't think I'm going to have to worry about getting pregnant. But with that said, though, you stated something there that I want to latch on to for a moment. You don't care about birth control. There are some people who have different religious backgrounds that do care about birth control. They care to the point that saying if you are impeding the act of procreation, that is a sin. So here's the problem. It's okay for you to believe that birth control is okay, abortion isn't. And we can respect that right. You know, you have it, you're willing to come out publicly and say it, I applaud you for that. What if the other people say both birth control and abortion are wrong? They take it to the next step.
Well, I agree, but I also don't want to buy other people's condoms. I don't think that that's fair. I'm being forced to pay for them. They say, well, it's women's health and it's their rights, and I'm like, well, if it's your right, then get a job, buy your own condoms, and that's fine. But don't force me to pay for them.
What about vaccinations? What about feeding the poor? What about creating roads and infrastructure that we all utilize?
Well, that's all fine.
What if the abortion is medically necessary to save the woman's life?
That there should be exemptions for, rape cases, physical health disorders, if the mother might die or the child might die. I agree with all those medical reasons, and they're sound reasons. I agree with them. I believe there are exceptions to the cause. There are a lot of exceptions to a lot of things. But being forced to pay for something that you do not believe in is kind of, I think, overhanded of the government to say that. If you want to go out and party and have sex with 100 different people in a month and buy boxes and boxes of condoms, that's your choice. If you want to go drink, that's your choice. I shouldn't have to pitch in for your party supplies, though.
Well, I mean, the thing
Okay,
is,
so hold on. So what if I'm a homebody, a perfectly normal person who only sleeps with one person? We used protection, we used birth control, we used condoms. I still got pregnant, and I don't want the child. Then what?
Then you should have
What
the
gives
option
you
of
the right to
buying a
tell me that
health.
I have to
Yeah,
have it?
you should be able to buy a health insurance plan that custom fits your needs and your lifestyle, like Odin said. I agree. If you want something that covers that, great. But you shouldn't force everybody to have to buy that kind of coverage, which is what the government has done at this point.
Well, here's something I want to bring up before we bring Tank in here. Um, by that extension, then, because what you're doing is you are paying a for a service that is going to be granted to you should you need it. And it just so happens that part of your payments are being distributed to other people that be granted a service should they need it. Where do we draw the line to say, okay, here's where it stops? Because you're saying birth control is fine, abortions no, unless it's absolutely necessary and deemed by a doctor. Some people say no birth control, no abortion. Others would say birth control, no, abortion, only in these circumstances, but 5 doctors have to agree with it. Then hold on, because we're still going with this here. Now it's all right. You know what? I don't want my money going to support people who are going to go and drink and fornicate on a Saturday night, which means no roads, which means no police to make sure that nothing bad happens throughout the day, evening, and night. No lights, no infrastructure, none of that, because all of that enables them to go and drink and fornicate on a Saturday night. Where does the line get drawn?
Right. I mean, if you take that whole, well, I don't want my money paying for something I don't believe in. Well, Amish people are a religious group as well. They don't believe in using technology. So, but we take the taxes from the money that they earn doing things. The government takes taxes and uses that to pay for infrastructure for technology. They use that to pay for internet at the schools, for heaven's sake. So, does that mean that we can't do that anymore too? Because that goes
Uh,
against their beliefs? I mean, it's the same argument.
I
it
mean,
goes
the
back
biggest
to
argument,
oh,
and
go ahead.
it's building off this immediately, is the fact that, like, you know, there's obviously exceptions, and I'm not going to shoot down, anybody for saying this, but, we pay taxes, and a lot of tax money goes into the military, and, you know, justified or not, in some cases it is, it's not. There's a lot of people that die, and last time I checked, killing someone was a sin for pretty much every religion on the planet. You know,
Murder is a sin.
Yeah, well, I think it's actually well, but still, that's kind of what would you define as murder, which is basically a person killing another person. But the thing is, if you're using the argument of you shouldn't be forced to pay for that, that means a vast majority of people that would hold that true, well, tax money goes into the military, which also goes into like the police departments. We've had, unfortunately, in the last several months, a couple officer-involved shootings where they weren't justified shootings, and that was now considered murder. Technically, everybody that paid in taxes to their, through the definitions that's being presented here, was now, kind of paying to help murder. So that argument can kind of be really wishy-washy on being forced to be
Yeah,
paid by
exactly.
something for the government. Now, I do agree with Odin. I do agree with you, Krusty. I think that, I mean, this health insurance plan that was put out way before it was ready. It really needed a lot more work, but it was a political agenda, and now we're kind of having to muddle through fixing it. I definitely having to pay for insurance and stuff. There's a decent amount of things I'm paying for insurance that I don't think I'm ever going to use or need. Like Odin said, probably never going to be able to bear a child. Being male and all, unless like the movie Junior happens and I just somehow happen to get one put into me. But I digress.
Trump
Like,
Jr.
but yeah, the movie Junior. But like so. I mean, there needs to be a lot more customization. They kind of, it's almost like they presented this, the healthcare, the universal healthcare law as kind of like the baseline, and I hate to say it, as many things and many laws are in the U.S. and some other countries, they will offer a baseline that's very, very gray, very, very plain, and then have people kind of build it up from there, just like the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. We've had to build up where we're at, you know overall. Like, we didn't just have the Bill of Rights and that's it. We're still going by that. We've had to change and adapt it. I mean, shoot, we've got what, two amendments that completely contradict each other. Alcohol is illegal. Okay, now it's not. It's fine. Forget that other one. Like, so like in the sense of laws, and unfortunately, to have a government is kind of to, I don't want to say be enslaved, but there is a certain amount of, you have to pay in for the government to survive. It's kind of the necessary evil, as it were, in some people's eyes. And a lot of people, I think, in general, they will get on to a certain topic, and they'll look at only that topic, but then they'll kind of falter a little bit because they have to realize that this and this also applies to it, and that can kind of shoot down the conversation. Like with the clerk lady, one of the stories was that she was doing this because she believed in the sanctity of marriage, but to some people, apparently, I guess, from several articles I've shared with people here and read, she's been married and divorced a couple times. She gave birth 5 months after a divorce, meaning she got pregnant by another man while still married. A lot of a good majority of people would consider that crushing the sanctity of marriage, but that's her standpoint. And unfortunately, there's a lot of people that will do things like that where, for instance, there was, this happened a year or two ago, there was a man that was a figurehead in the KKK, and he was caught with a African American male prostitute. So, there is a certain amount of, it's good to have the beliefs, but, I think everybody in general, and this goes for both sides, because there's plenty of people saying, that this is fine and stuff, that also don't fact check themselves and do things that, contradict them. But I think as a society in general, we need to move forward and kind of making sure we know what our arguments are before we just start spitting them out. We've got things like the media and stuff that will literally just ready, fire, aim, and they'll start just shooting out the stories to get people to watch them and get the feeds before they even get the story right. And like, that's caused a lot of problems. And this is maybe leaving the main topic a little bit, but I think as a general, we kind of need to start fact checking ourselves and start really seeing the bigger pictures of what's being involved when issues come up. Because we're for instance, in this country, I know somebody that they're very much for protecting gay rights and these rights, but yet they're against several of the wars that are going on in the Middle East, where some of those countries, if you're homosexual, you're executed. So there's kind of that weird thing where it's like, yeah, you want to protect the home front, but what makes them different from the people on the home front? If you believe in that, you should believe in the whole thing, and you should want to protect everybody instead of a specific aspect.
Well, I agree. And as a Christian, I know each religion's a little different. Some of them are more extreme than others. And I believe in praying for those who as Christians in general, we think, well, they just don't understand what they're doing. They don't see the evil that's begotten them. So we pray for them to hopefully come around to a different view of life. We pray for those, try to help everybody we can. So, and we do believe that it's a free choice. God gave us all a free will. And there's grace, which gives us forgiveness. So he forgives all of us. We're all Nobody's perfect. We all make mistakes, just like the clerk lady getting divorced, getting married, getting divorced, having a child out of wedlock, whatever. Those might be sins, but you can be forgiven if your heart's in the right place. But for the government, the biggest problem is the government getting involved and forcing rules down. There is no rule, no law in place that says anything about marriage. There's only one constitution that says freedom of religion. There's really no law on the book that defines marriage. The Supreme Court just decided to define it, give it a definition.
All right, then with that, then if they're saying that there's no law that define marriage, who said that marriage is defined as between one man and one woman? Why can't it be between two people who want to enter this union called a marriage?
Because it's always been a religious institute. The federal government got involved because of insurance, because of benefits, death beneficiaries, stuff like that. When the legal system got involved, that's when it became an issue. People should be able to give their benefits and cover whoever they want on their health insurance or on their, and will whatever they want to their death beneficiaries, without marriage being involved at all.
But there are laws that are made in each state. There are laws that are made in each state that state that if you are not married, you cannot do these things, including you cannot receive benefits from your spouse that has died. You cannot go visit them in the hospital. You cannot, adopt children together. You can't buy a house together. You can't own property together. You can't even run for public office in some states if you are not married.
Right. So they need to
how is then
entirely.
But then if there is no law stating that what defines marriage legally, other than, hey, if you are two people, you are entering this contract, here's your certificate stating you're entering this contract recognized by the state and by extension the federal government, you are now a legal entity together. You can now enter together as one legal entity other binding contracts. That's there. That's in place now. When we have other people and other entities who are making laws that are now imposing somebody else's religious beliefs to stop a select group of citizens that otherwise would not have be any different from any other groups of citizens, they're being excluded, they're being disenfranchised, and that now is a violation of their civil rights, and that is protected under the law.
Yes. Now I want to address something you said, Krusty. You said that a person should be able to add anyone they want onto their insurance and have them covered. Well, what if I want to? If I want to add my next door neighbor?
Yeah, whatever you want to pay for, you should be able to do. Whatever you want to do on a legal contract to whatever you want to do it. But
my employer pays for half. But my employer pays for part of my insurance premium. So why should my employer have to pay part of the premium for my next door neighbor to be covered? Why stop at my next door neighbor? Why not? Why can't I have my entire street?
My mistake.
On my insurance.
Not neighbor, but households. It's whoever's living in your household. Is usually how it used to be before state laws. Before they were banned from crossing state lines to get insurance. And
the state law, the laws regard. You say there's no laws regarding marriage, but that's not true. Because for as long as I've been alive, for as long as my parents have been alive, for as long as their parents have been alive, we've had to go through a process to get to the legal recognition of the state of being married. They had to go to a state office, and by state I mean government run, not necessarily at the state level. Could be city, could be county, could be federal, could be state. Okay, but a government office, fill out an application, pay a fee, go through a process, whatever is legally recognized, There have been laws about this for at least 3 generations, if
Okay,
not more.
right. But
Okay?
these are
So to
state.
say there haven't been laws
Okay,
until now, that's not true.
well, my mistake. I meant like a federal government definition of marriage. There's never been anything. There's nothing in the Constitution about that.
Well, it's been
There's
broad.
just freedom of
It's
religion.
been very broad.
It's states had the rights to define what the beliefs are of those states. You know, is state law for here, state law for there. In Nevada, anybody can go through a drive-through and get married. That's fun. That's Sin City. That's why Christians call it Sin City. You do what you want in Nevada. We don't go there for a reason. You know, there's a lot of things that it's just our fear is the government imposing a blanket way of life on everybody that everybody has to accept that, okay, well, it may be a sin, but everybody has to deal with it, accept it, fine. You know,
They're simply saying that they have the right to do it. They're not saying you have to agree with it. They're not saying you have to believe that it's right or that it's moral. They're simply saying that the government is going to legally recognize it. That's all. That's all that is being said.
He touched on something that I've been trying to understand, and I'd like to elaborate on that further, where he feels that there are certain, and there are a lot of people who feel this way, that there are certain ways of life that would be deemed as sinful based off of whichever religion that you follow. And there is a fear that that would not just be allowed, but imposed upon those who want to live a specific way of life. Is that correct so far?
right. Like, there's Muslim communities where, you know, whole neighborhoods are Muslim and they all believe in that way, and that's fine. There's Christian communities where 90% of the neighborhood's all Christian, whether they party now, but they still, deep down, they were raised Christian. They'll, when they get older and relax, they'll start going back to church eventually. They may not be Christian behaving at the moment, but everybody goes through phases. But in general, there's Christian communities, there's Muslim communities, there's this community, that community. Entire cities where I've lived in California that were mostly Mexicans and whites, Catholics. Whole, you know, San Jose and San Juan Capistrano, the whole community is basically Catholic. Whether all of them are following the rules right or not is a different story, but, you know, the belief is there. But to sit there and have the federal government impose anything that says everything has to be acceptable, everything is okay, your religion doesn't matter anymore, is basically how we're starting to feel.
That's not what they're saying. That's not what they're saying, though. The government is saying that the separate entity of the government that has always been separate from religion is now going to recognize this status under these conditions. That's all they're saying. They're not saying that the church has to agree with it. They're not saying the church is not free to disagree with it. They're simply saying that they, as a government agency, are going to recognize this condition and call it married in the eyes of the state, meaning the government of the land. That is all they're saying.
You almost said married in the eyes of God. It sounded like.
No, I didn't say. I didn't.
Okay.
Married in the eyes of the government was what I said.
Now, here's where I'm coming in with this here, because depending on which denomination that you follow, the way that you live may be seen, some aspect of the way that you live personally may be seen as sinful in the eyes of some other denomination that shares the title of Christianity. At what point then should you be oppressed based off of somebody else's religious views?
Well, that's why it's freedom of religion. You can worship anything you want, any way you want. The government should not be involved.
Does that any way you want include excluding the rights and privileges of United States citizens.
Right. But
Does that
I don't
include it?
see how anything in the Christian religion imposes any harm on anybody else. I mean, it's pretty
Well,
much
this has actually been used throughout history, specifically United States history, where you can justify slavery, you can justify the place of women in society, you can justify child labor, you can justify who should be wealthy and who should not be wealthy, you can justify jingoism, you can justify a matter of other things simply by stating this is one of the tenets of our religion.
yeah, but that's all government rules like slavery and all that. At one point,
Slavery
there,
wasn't defined. Slavery wasn't defined explicitly in any sort of government documents until the Declaration of Independence, and that's them recognizing, okay, you know what, we have an economy in certain areas that require slave labor. Some of them vehemently oppose slavery, including the ones that owned slaves, which was hypocritical, but they wanted to keep their wealth and power. So they compromised on it and stated, okay, this is what we're going to have, and we're going to write this document here, and then we're going to create another document called the Constitution that will supersede this. And we're going to leave it to the future generations to be able to use this as a framework and then build a society on top of that. So that way, religion will be protected from government, and government will be protected from religion. And we're going to have ideas that are going to be universal to carry and take care of and serve all the citizens of the United States while holding them accountable to themselves and to each other. And that's how it should be in the situation that they set up. In the framework that they set up, it's there. In practice, we've had wars going on both sides where there's been some religious suppression, there's been some that kept some entities using religion to try and gain power in the government in check, and there's some where they would have their own specific religious beliefs imposed upon others, to the point where Christians were fighting against other Christians, to where Catholics were being suppressed and oppressed, to where some people based off of nationality or skin color were oppressed. And then when society's viewpoints changed overall, those oppressions were either lifted or removed slowly or quickly, or somehow just completely eradicated and seen as wrong. This has happened from the oppression of Italians, the oppression of the Irish, and I don't even need to go into Native Americans or our Africans that came over here and became African Americans. Don't even go into that. But all those things happened.
it's a shame that governments and societies use religion as an excuse for war or slavery or any of those things. And a lot of good Christians throughout history have died trying to help slaves, the Underground Railroad, all these different things, speaking their mind. Martyrdom is basically what it accounts to. And as a Christian, we, I don't know how all of them see it, but as I see it is everybody is a Gentile if you're not a Jew. You're either born a Jew or you're born not a Jew, which is what the definition of Gentile is. And Christianity accepts all nationalities, all God's children throughout the world. And anybody can do whatever you want. That's, the devil, our belief is, in that there is a devil and he's influencing the world, he's influencing the governments, he's influencing every aspect of the world that he can get his claws into. And as Christians, we just want to be able to stake out our little lot and say, look, we don't want to get involved in a lot of stuff. We want a peaceful place where we can call what our view of normal is, and where we can worship God the way we reinterpret the Bible, basically without the federal government or any government telling us how to do things. And that's what the founding
Well,
fathers, I think, had in
they're
mind.
not telling they're not telling you how to believe though. They're not
They're,
telling you how to believe. They're not telling you how to worship. They're not saying you can't believe that homosexuality or gay marriage is wrong.
right.
They're
So,
simply saying that as a government, they're going to legally recognize that type of union. That's all.
right. Well, what we're saying now is that, or at least what I think should happen, is let's take marriage out of the equation then. They want to add whoever in their household to their insurance, great. They want to go to a lawyer and have their death benefits go to whoever they want, great. Well, let's just take marriage out of the equation.
But the point
Why does they have to be
that the
married
term
to have that?
marriage, the term, because that's what the term marriage has come to mean in our society, not just
Not
a
my
religious
society.
union, not necessarily a religious union, but a legally recognized state of being. That is what marriage is in our society. And it may not be what you want, but that is what it is.
Let's actually go with his example here that he's just proposed. Let's say, okay, for everybody, we have just removed the word marriage universally across the board. What is preventing two people from going to an attorney and saying, these are the benefits that I want to grant the other person here. These are the rights that I want to grant the other person here as a part of my life. So they will have the equivalent of a power of attorney over my own life should something happen to me.
Right.
In some states, there are laws preventing that from happening to certain groups of people. Is that right?
I don't know how it would work. I mean, it's theory. Crap.
No, there's no theory. This is real. There are laws that would prevent people from doing exactly that. It's not universally applied to everybody. It is to a specific group of people. Is that right?
No, I would argue no, it's not.
Well,
It
and
comes
even
right
the-
back down to civil rights. Why one group and not another?
You see, the fear for Christians is that government laws and holy matrimony are being blurred together. So if you take marriage out of the government laws, then we wouldn't give a darn. You do what you want in your own home, not in public. And
But marriage has been part of government laws for
marriage is
generations.
a religious ceremony. It's always been a religious, thousands of years it's been a religious ceremony. You go to a priest, a man and a woman, they get
When-
married. Take that out of the government end of it and just let people who are not religious, like gays and lesbians, go to a lawyer, get the same benefits, that's fine. But don't go say, hey, now we're married like husband and wife in holy matrimony. You're taking something that is Christian and applying it to a non-Christian lifestyle.
Well, here, all right, for two
But
things.
marriage-
I'm not going
No,
to go
they
down
are
the street dressed in red and call myself a blood, and I'm a white guy that looks nothing like a gangbanger. You
No,
know,
you actually
because I'm
being a
wearing all
blood
red
has
doesn't
nothing to
make
do
me
with
a blood.
skin color. Being a blood or a crypt has nothing to do with skin color. It has
I
everything to
beg
do
to
with the
differ. I
attitude.
got beat up several times in Southern California.
And you know what? And those people are ignorant fools for doing so.
Right.
Period. End of discussion. You know,
Right,
I'm
but
saying
there's-
that as
They
I'm
believe
saying
that
as
I'm
a
not a
black
blood
person.
just because I claim I am one. You know,
Right, but you
Christian sees
calling
it.
yourself something there, like calling yourself a Christian, and I'm not speaking to you. I'm just speaking to in
Right.
general. Calling yourself a Christian doesn't make you one. It is the actions of following the tenets of whatever is defined by Christianity that makes you a Christian. Now, there are several thousand different denominations that have different subsets of rules that you should follow based off of whichever denomination that you believe in that would say you are a good Christian if you follow these tenets.
And none of them
Which one
have
is it?
gay marriage in it. None of them.
There are a couple that actually allow gay marriage in there.
They're starting to now,
Yeah,
trying
there
to
are.
comply with
But
the
there have been
political.
some that have been doing it for decades because they see no interference between the creation of God from limiting two people to be married to each other. That has been that that entire belief for that denomination of Christianity. And there are people who say, yeah, they're not bothering me. Okay, that's fine. What I'm going on from a different standpoint here is, at what point then do we say we're going to impose restrictions on one group of people because of somebody else's religious beliefs? Here's where a position where all they are doing is attempting to get a contract, a contractual agreement finalized by this government entity stating that they are together. They're not going into a church for a ceremony. They are attempting to get a government-issued document stating that they are together and should be recognized as an entity. That is being prevented. Is that right?
It should be dependent on each state, just like prostitution, just like gambling, just like every lifestyle choice people make. The majority of the people, it's voting, it's a democracy. If your state votes for it, fine. If your state votes against it, fine.
All right, then let me put some more details into it. Should a man and a woman who have different hair color be barred from marrying each other?
People in each community should decide what they believe. There should be no discrimination based on race, color, creed, none of that. You
Then
make religious
even-
choices
So what
based.
makes
even if
sexuality
it's against,
different?
well, even if it's against somebody's religion to marry someone with black hair and red hair, or brown hair and blonde hair, even if it is against somebody's religion to do so, if they are in a position of power within the state and or federal government, should they restrict the same rights that anybody else would have had to these two people because of the difference of their hair color?
That's why I'm describing it as separate legal issues and marital issues. Marriage being holy matrimony and legal doctrine being legal doctrine. Let them have
I'm
the
talking
legal
about
right.
legal
But
doctrine.
I
I'm only talking
point-
about legal doctrine right here. If they are attempting to enter into a contract with the state and or federal government, should they be denied access to enter into that contract based off of their hair color?
No. No, not at all. It just, you know,
Even though it's against the person who has been charged with the duties of issuing this contract, the certificate of contractual agreement to this entity. If this person says it's against my religious beliefs to issue person with brown hair and blonde hair this contract saying that they are now recognized as a singular entity in the state government and in the federal government,
okay,
should
state
they still
government
be
and
barred?
federal or just federal?
Well, in this case here, as United States citizens, they should enjoy the basic rights, which will include entering into a legally binding contract with another entity.
Okay, well, you're getting into two different sets of rules here.
No, it's the same
States-
rule. It is the
states-
same rule.
Federal should have different. The federal government shouldn't be involved at all. Is
The
what states-
federal government has only steps in whenever there is a violation of the Constitution, and one of them is that states that if you have one specific entity that has its rights being denied or suppressed, where if they were any other group would enjoy it, then that's an issue where they need to step in and correct that. If you were born with blonde hair and you wanted to marry a woman who had red hair, and you could do it in 49 other states, but you want to live in this one state here because your job is there, because your family is there, because everything else is there, and that state is saying you do not get to enjoy the same rights here as you do everywhere else.
You're talking about
Or
race and
let's
color.
go.
No,
That's
Let's
no,
go
hold
one
on,
step
hold on.
further.
I'm talking about hair color. Yes, I am specifically talking about hair color.
Yeah.
right.
Right.
That's not religion.
No, but hold on. But the religious belief of the person who's issuing that certificate is saying, it is against my religion to have a person with blonde hair marry somebody with red hair, and they are in a public office, power position to issue this certificate, or to even recognize this certificate, let alone issue it. Should that be allowed? Should you and your supposed person that you want to enter this contractual agreement with be denied that right?
The
Hey,
right
Odin.
or the benefit?
It's a right. It's a right and a benefit. You should have the benefit of knowing that you could walk through the entire 50 states and other U.S. territories and not have that right and benefit taken away from you arbitrarily. That contract is recognized by the United States.
And you're saying it should be up to each state. Well, let's take it one step further. Let's say you live in a state where blonde-haired people and red-haired people are allowed to marry. You meet and fall in love with a red-haired woman and you marry her, and you've been living together for 20 years as a married couple, as a legally recognized, as a government legally recognized couple, one single entity, okay, for all legal intents and purposes. Then your job says you have to move to this state, to this other state over
Okay.
here.
The federal.
But the only problem is that other state doesn't recognize your marriage because they don't believe, or your union, because they don't believe that a blonde-haired person and a red-haired person should be married.
Okay, well, there's a difference between religious discrimination, if you want to call it that, and religion described, or discrimination described in the Constitution, which is based on race, color, and creed. We do not allow that in the United States.
And sexual orientation. It does say
No,
sexual
that was
orientation.
added later.
Well, so was
Laws.
race. Race was added later.
The sexual orientation was not
Race
added
was added
based on democracy. Nobody voted for that. They were told to accept it. That's the problem.
Race was added later too, though.
Yeah, because good Christians got up and argued for it.
Well, I mean, yeah, there were some Christians
There
who
were plenty
argue
of
for
Christians
this.
that did.
Yeah.
And there were plenty of Christians who argued against it as well.
Anyway, for just some fun, I'd like Odin to look at the link that I linked, because just for fun, since we're talking about definitions here, I Googled and looked up the Merriam-Webster definition for what marriage is. And since Odin's voice is just so much better than mine, I'd like him just to read down the list to everybody, just so everybody kind of can hear what is the online definition of marriage, according to this dictionary.
Marriage, defined as the relationship that exists between a husband and a wife. A similar relationship between people of the same sex. A ceremony in which two people are married to each other. The second line is a recent addition to this.
Right.
But the first line and the third line have been around for centuries.
1,000 years.
And the ceremony does not necessarily need to be religious. It could be a gathering of people who want to share a specific event, and they go through a predefined ritual that all of them have agreed upon as recognized as this, as the marking of this specific event. That's a ceremony. Whether it has religious implications or not, that's up to them. But the first line and the third line has existed for centuries. Who calls who husband and wife is irrelevant. They are recognized as two people who are coming together.
What I also notice in here is that the word religion does not appear anywhere in here, nor does the phrase "in the eyes of God" or any other kind of religious tone. The only thing even remotely that one could consider remotely religious would be the word ceremony, which does not necessarily have to be a religious ceremony.
Now, that's not to say that, religion is being encroached upon and having their own particular beliefs eroded, but equally, religion does not own these things. Religion does not have the right to usurp power over these things. These things have existed for centuries before a specific religion existed. Christianity in and of itself, that almost died except for two different specific events, has existed only for 2,000 years, plus or minus a couple decades here, depending on who you're actually believing and following. Christianity is relatively new to the scene. The only thing younger than Christianity is those who are of the Muslim faith. And then even then, they have like 5,000 different, splintering groups off of Sharia and Shiite that are even newer than just the overall Muslim faith.
Catholics came along 350 AD, Muslims came along 650 AD, roughly. So both of those are after Christianity. True Christianity was way before both Catholicism and Muslims.
Both of those, though, all three, honestly, are within the last 2,000 years. A relatively young time period for them to exist, a small time period for them to exist. They were all relatively young religions in comparison to some of the other ones that are out there, of which a lot of them have come and gone. So for religious institutions to say that we own marriage is factually false. You can say that you perform a lot of the marriage ceremonies. That is true. But practicing and performing a lot of religious ceremonies does not equal ownership.
Okay.
I have a question for you, Krusty.
Sure.
Would you say that Joseph and Mary were married?
I don't know. It's not described thoroughly, and
Would you say they'd be considered to have been married? That concept existed in their world?
I believe they treated each other as though. I don't know if they had the actual ceremony. I know it was Jewish at the time that they were. They probably got married.
So then what did people do? If you say marriage is a Christian thing, then what did people do before Christianity?
Jesus
What
was
did
a
Mary
Jew.
and Joseph do? What about their parents and their parents before that? I mean, the concept of marriage has been around a lot longer than Christianity has.
Right. Christianity, and then Catholicism, and then Muslim, all derived from the Jewish religion. So you go back 5,000 years, and that's where the whole belief system started, which all three of them follow the Jewish belief of the marriage. So that's
But
where
even
that
before
comes from.
that, other cultures and religions
Right.
that were polytheistic had marriage. Romans, the Greeks, the Syrians, Babylon, all of them had marriage that was, yes, part of their religion and part of their state, but it also was, very highly political in a lot of times. Like, look at what happened with Julius Caesar and Cleopatra. Two completely different religions getting married to show, community and groupingness, and to bring the Egyptian, let's call it an empire, and the Roman Empire together for, basically to make one giant, awesome power.
It was a
That happened in Europe.
socioeconomic status that also allowed them a
Right,
military
exactly.
presence and protection.
Right, and neither of them were accepted by either of their cultures at the time anyway. They were both considered
But
outcasts.
that's not the point. That's not the point. The point is that concept, that idea, was around long before Christianity. So then what gives Christianity the right to say that it's only this? And that nobody else has the right to decide what it is?
The Jewish that we go by, the original Jewish doctrine, was way before the Romans and the Egyptians. So I don't know.
Well, here's one other thing then, if we want to go back that far into a biblical history. Where in the Bible did it state that abortion is illegal and is not right and is morally wrong?
It doesn't.
It doesn't.
It says murder is against the Ten Commandments, and it also gives, moral judgments throughout the scriptures over and over that, taking a life without a good reason is really bad. It's just frowned on highly.
What if I told you that within the Bible there was a commandment, and based off of the way it was stated, allegedly brought down by God himself, to be used as a test for a woman's fidelity? They are to drink a certain elixir, and if they had a miscarriage, in effect a miscarriage of that child, then that was from an unfaithful union. And if it didn't, you're good to go. It's your child, you're all right. Isn't that act kind of inducing an abortion?
I'd have to read the scripture you're referring to. I'm not familiar with it.
Let me pull it up right now.
I apologize. I'm not a scholar. I don't know everything. I just have.
I had some. I was earmarked when I was younger to be an assistant pastor, and then I had this deep reading and reanalyzing of it, and it is actually what started to set me off, and really I need to reanalyze this again and to look at it. And there's a lot of inconsistencies with the Bible that forced me to reconcile with myself. Okay, if this is something that I'm deeply following, it has to be right. It has to be perfect. Because if it isn't, then something's wrong here. And I need to find out what's wrong.
Yeah, there's one translation that when the King James and King Henry and many of the English translations from back in Europe screwed up on during the Ten Commandments, that triggered a whole chain of events. And it was originally screwed up by the Vatican when they translated the Bible. The Ten Commandments, one phrase, it was corrected in 1912, I believe, by scholars from Christian, Hebrew, and Greek translators got together, and it was supposed to be thou shalt not murder instead of thou shalt not kill. Which the kill made the Bible contradictory in several places. The Old Testament, God told people to kill several times. They had to go in and conquer Israel when they left Egypt. They had to go in and kill wicked places, every man, woman, child, goat, cattle, dogs, everything, because they were sinful villages. Killing is not a sin. It's why you kill. If you're murdering, that's a sin, if you're killing for evil intent. But if you're defending, or if it's for a good cause, like, oh, it could kill the mother, yeah, kill the child, kill the fetus. Or if you're trying to save the fetus and it kills, you got to kill the mom. Whatever the choice is. I'm sure I'm not familiar with all that, but there's reasons for abortion. But it can't just be, oh, I partied too hard, I got drunk, I got laid, and then I'm having an abortion, and then I do it again next week, and then I do it again. That's living a sinful life, and I shouldn't have to pay for it. The marriage definition, I see your guys' points, both Catherine's and yours, and it makes you think, it makes me think. My concern still is the government, federal government, imposing its legalistic views on everybody, whether you're religious or not. And I'm not really sure the answer to all that. I see your guys' points. I have my fears of the government forcing sin upon everybody and forcing us to pay for it and forcing us to accept it and letting it just be in my face and in my children's face and having to deal with it.
And our fear is that the government would be taken by some entity and then imposing some restrictions upon other people to live the exact, at least the baseline exact same rights and liberties that other people do. That's a problem. Even in some states where they could legally get married, homosexual people can also legally be fired from their job just for being homosexual. Is that right?
No. Well, it depends on where you work. If you're trying to work in a more...
All right, if you're not working at a church, you're working at a Fortune 500 company, and you just so happen to be headquartered in
that's
this state.
discrimination. I agree.
Then, and how is it then that there are laws that being written by some people of certain faiths that take that faith and take some of its doctrines to an extreme and state that this is the way it should be and not the way that people should be protected under the Constitution? They want to supersede the Constitution and say that no, our religious beliefs should be imposed upon other people. If you are homosexual, you should not have employment in this state. Because it's real. It happens. Here's the...
Yes, it does. Odin, Timber's been waiting quite patiently.
Yes,
He said he
sorry,
wanted to...
yes.
Yeah.
Timber,
So
by
okay.
all means.
Well, y'all brought me into this. I've been listening this whole time, and I've spoken on the show previously about this, and quite honestly, it's one of those things I tried to get away. You pulled me back in. Biggest thing that I would say, and I will openly state I am a Christian, not to start another hostile conversation or anything like that. It's simply what I can see a lot of Christians being afraid of. It has nothing to do with the marriage institution. Because I'll say as a Christian, I could care less. You want to marry whoever you want to marry, fine. It's the fear of the government forcing the unions, as far as who does the unions, onto the churches. That's what they're fearing. They're fearing that they're going to go above the separation of church and state. So that, okay, it's legal, now all churches have to do it, and it's not going to be that way. See, that if they make it legal, you can get married at the court. It's a federal building, it's a federal law, and you'll get married there. 100% legal, carries throughout the state. What some groups have been trying to do, and they're only doing this to push the buttons of the issue, to further propagate the hate, quote-unquote, by Christians, and they pick the right people to do it with, is they'll go to churches and say, you have to marry us now. And under separation of church and state, churches have a legal right to deny marrying a same-sex couple. It has nothing to do with the law. It has to do with their religious beliefs, and it has to do with the separation of church and state. The state can't force a religion to do something. Now, we can just say, okay, whatever. Y'all want to do that? That's fine. You just can't do it in this building because it goes against our personal religious beliefs. And it doesn't conflict with anything as far as, for me, and I'm stating this personally, it doesn't conflict with anything of my Christian faith or belief of any kind of that. They want to get married, fine, whatever. It has nothing to do with me. Some people have kind of made that assumption, well, if they pass it, it's being forced onto me. For me, I'm not taking it that way. For me, I've just kind of got the joke, okay, just everybody can have that misery of marriage, because everybody's going to face that. It's not just happy-go-lucky, everybody gets married, everybody's happy. We've proven that with heterosexual marriages. It's not all roses. Now, I understand the benefits of the marriage as far as the state and federal governments. You get your benefits when it comes to income taxes or insurance beneficiaries, and that's perfectly fine. Don't deny a daggum thing. But that's the primary fear, is that it's going to be a supersede of the separation of church and state. And it's something the federal government won't do, but people have that fear. And it goes even to the arguments of the businesses, like, for example, the cake incident, I want to say within the past year. If the business is founded under religious beliefs, then it's openly broadcast and stated, hey, this is a Christian bakery, we believe these things, and we're promoting this business under this religion, under our beliefs. Well, naturally, if you're trying to push an agenda, that's the first place you're going to do to push the agenda. Now, that there's 15 other bakeries in the area that would gladly make that cake. But you're pushing the issue with the one won't, to push your political view, to make it where they have to pander to you. They have to compromise what you know is their belief. And that's not right. That's something totally different. You're saying because of a federal law, you have to compromise your religious beliefs. And it's mainly just, okay, well, you don't believe in it, so you're evil, you're anti-gay, you're this, you're that. And it's not. It's just they have a personal religious belief. They do not want to cross that line. They believe it's a certain way, and they have their right to believe that certain way. Does a federal law change their beliefs? No. Bravo. Federal law is in effect. Fantastic. It doesn't affect religious beliefs, and it can't be forced into the church. And I've even seen stories of it where same-sex couples are purposefully going to churches that they know will deny them just to make headlines, when they know there are plenty of Christian or Catholicism churches that have opened their doors to same-sex marriages because they have a looser definition, or they have a broader scope to their religious beliefs. They're gladly opening their doors to marry same-sex couples all over the country. But the churches or the businesses that are being targeted are well known for their strict religious beliefs, and it's merely a political gain, a news headline. But I think that's the biggest fear, is that the Christians that are vehemently opposed it, they're thinking the moment it goes into law, federal government's going to be knocking on the door, you have to believe this, or you're in prison, or you're this, or you're that. And it's not going to happen that way because of separation of church and state. And if there wasn't a separation of church and state, you'd still have under God in your Pledge of Allegiance at school. That was done because of separation of church and state. I mean, I'm sorry, I had to rant.
I
No,
agree.
good rant. I think the one thing, and this is also kind of going back to the whole cake thing, and this is also going to be a really sore topic that I think you guys spoke on about a month or two ago, was there was, with the whole Confederate flag thing that had happened recently, what had happened was there was a person that I went to, I think it was like a Walmart or something like that, and wanted a cake with the Confederate flag on it just because it was like some party or something, and like they outwardly refused not to do it. I mean, technically freedom of speech type things you could argue in that, but you don't see that really going past what happened there, because how many people here really heard about that happening or anything falling from that? They're just like, oh, okay, they went to a different place that would do it. Like Timber is right. There are some people that are going out there and unfortunately using what should be a good thing as a weapon to make money. And let's be blunt. That's many people have done similar things and have done dumb things to try to force lawsuits to get money because it's popular at the time, or there's something going on with it at the time.
True.
So that happened.
True. Now, to be completely fair, and I want to preface this, I am not saying I agree with the tactic of purposely going to the religious establishments that you know are going to turn you down when you are a same-sex couple for the purpose of getting attention or trying to push the envelope or trying to force your beliefs. I do not agree with that at all. But with other issues that were not necessarily religiously centered or centered around same-sex couples, that kind of tactic of going to the places where you know they're not following the law or where they're not, meeting everybody's rights and making that known has been an accepted tactic in the past for other issues. An example would be, the physically disabled person trying to ride the city bus after the law went into effect saying that all city buses had to be wheelchair accessible. I mean, you see what I'm saying? that kind of thing, or or trying to get into a door that's, same. I mean, things that have not been so religiously tied into religion. That's what I'm trying
Yeah,
to say.
but I would
Have
say with
been
the
taught the same way.
handicapped, I would say with the handicapped, it's more it's more open for debate. It's more open to, okay, well, this does need to happen
It is.
because I have a handicap, of a condition, of a disability. People are more willing to look at that. It's not a hot topic issue. It's not going to hit headlines if
It's not a
Right.
hot.
It
Actually,
is.
let me
it,
interject. It's not a hot topic
It is. But
anymore. It was a
yeah.
hot topic back then when it was
exactly.
needed, and this is when I was a kid. That people who were disabled in wheelchairs were handcuffing themselves to buses because they needed to get public transportation in order to be able to go to their jobs and be otherwise productive people in society. You know, other people were literally
Exactly.
saying,
Right.
well, since you are now no longer a functional human being just like me, you should now be denied any other access to do anything while I still enjoy these rights. It's while it's different, yes, there is something here where you actually have to make adjustments to accommodate them. They are now productive members of
Yes.
society because they had these civil disobedience tactics where they handcuffed themselves to a bus, which is illegal, and they were arrested.
Yes,
You
it
know,
is.
because they were they
And
were
yes, they were.
yes, because they were actually impeding a public service. They cause a disruption in other people's lives in order to have their own lives be seen as, hey, we need attention to be able to rectify this situation. And it wouldn't have been so much of a
Right.
problem if it was only one or two. But when you started to see Vietnam vets, people who had some sort of accident that caused them to be handicapped at this point or disabled, people who had a disease that caused them to be disabled, the non-functional limbs, people who were born this way, but otherwise could be productive members of society. They felt like they were completely shut out and nobody was listening to them. So they were being
Exactly.
civilly
Exactly.
disobedient in order to get attention to this. So to a degree, I
Right.
see this happening here. But in this case here, as far as one group going up to a church and saying, I want you to marry us, even though it's against your tenets here, and intentionally looking for a fight, I'm going to have to draw the line on this one and say, and my own personal opinion is say no, because the federal and state government should not start imposing somebody else's beliefs on this religious group here. Now,
And
if
I agree.
and it goes both ways. That's where the problem
It
is.
does.
Some people do not want to have it go both ways. And in order for us to make sure that it doesn't go both ways, we need to have reasonable people put and trusted with power to protect both sides before one group starts oppressing another group, and when that second group suddenly has power, they start oppressing the other one. We don't want that at all. We
Because
want reasonable people to be able to say, look, you want to enter into a contractual agreement with this other person stating that every state within the United States of America and all the territories should recognize your union and your legal rights to each other. Good. Congratulations. Here you go. Now I'm going to go to my religious institution and say, look, I don't agree with this. I want to say that this is wrong, but I am not going to make a law that would deny them their rights to be United States citizens and exercise all of the implied as well as explicit rights and liberties that they have as citizens.
fully agreed. I mean, it goes partially to the freedom of religion, where they have the religious freedom to, they believe it, they have the right to believe it, but and it's one of my tenets as a Christian. At the same time, you don't impose your beliefs on someone else. You're not supposed to. You
Right.
simply say your beliefs. This is what I believe, and if they want to follow, they follow. It's spoken in the Bible. You tell them your beliefs, and you give them your best. You give them your best. If they choose to follow, they follow. If they choose not to follow, you simply walk on, you go to the next one. You don't impose anything on them, because it's been proven if you impose it, it only makes it worse. You simply tell them and you walk on. And that's their choice. And that's on both sides of the table. I shouldn't be imposing my religious beliefs on a same-sex couple, but at the same time, the same-sex couple shouldn't be imposing on myself. If they tell me their best, I tell them my best, we don't see eye to eye on the issue of, let's say, eye color, then we don't impose each other till one submits to it. We simply just go our separate ways and go, oh, well, we just couldn't agree on it. Let's just go the separate ways. That's the way it's supposed to be. Not, well,
Right.
because you don't believe in this, you're evil or you're anti this or that. Oh, he just doesn't believe that or whatnot. That's his issue. Let's move on. Go over here. That's what it should be.
Back to
Right,
this other
and-
position here with the actual abortion. Sorry, Kirby, just real quick on this one here.
Okay.
Let me find where this was here. Numbers. This is the NIV. Well, let me see what you want. King James version.
Yeah, I just read it.
Okay, but you got it there. This is the whole thing where they go through, and the husband who is questioning the wife's fidelity brings her to the priest. She makes an oath. He makes an elixir, pretty much holy water, dirt from the sanctuary or the temple, and then they say, look, you drink this. If you done wrong, if you were unfaithful to your husband, this baby is not yours. It's going to be destroyed. Period.
Right. Yeah, I follow you. I see it.
This no ways about it. This is abortion.
Yep, you're right. And I see Catherine's point too on the marriage thing. You know, it's everybody's choice. I guess it's just scary for Christians in this modern age where, you know, everything is changing so rapidly, so drastically that it just feels like the government's forcing the whole country to be like California and Nevada. And we're afraid of that.
I can see that argument, Krusty. I really can. The other thing, and it hasn't helped, not just Christianity but other faiths, is you'll have splinter groups that they pick and choose, and it's something that irks the living hell out of me. They pick and choose what they want to fight for, and completely ignore everything else. So, like these particular splinter groups, they'll focus on the gay marriage, or they'll focus on the thou shalt not kill. They'll completely ignore the thou shalt not steal, or divorce being a sin.
Or thou shalt not bear false witness.
They'll forget those entirely, push those to the side. They'll focus on one thing because it's a hot topic or it's something they're vehemently against. But the moment you bring up the other things that they themselves have been committing, they just they shut up. And that it's something that irks me, because if you're going to go with the fundamentalists, you're going to go by Leviticus, which is all of these laws. You better go by all of them. You can't pick and choose. You have to either go by all or none.
Well,
And
those
let me tell you,
Leviticus
that's a
laws,
hell of a list.
okay, the Leviticus laws are the ones that Jesus was referring to as the Mosaic laws. And then the Apostle Paul and the apostles that were still alive while Paul was there made it clear that the Christians would not be the Gentiles would not be forced the Jewish Mosaic laws upon the Gentiles. Only the rules, the Ten Commandments, and what Jesus taught was the only thing that the Gentiles were to follow. And the modern Christianity, which was the Jews converting to the ones that followed Jesus instead of the tabernacle. And Yeah, there's a. I don't know.
Well, bringing this back though to what we have here in Kentucky and what attempted to happen in Florida, where we have people who have these devout religious beliefs, who are in these clerk of courts, who's a clerk of courts or in these court systems here, that should be doing a duty that they've either been elected to or appointed to the society that they live in, and they're not doing it citing their own religious beliefs. I believe Jesus was quoted as saying, "Render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and render unto the Lord what is the Lord's."
Yeah, they were talking about taxes at the time, but
Right.
yeah.
And these are the direct effects of these taxes. This includes the services that are brought upon by these taxes.
Now, you're right. You're all right in your different points. And but you got to look at it from another point of view, though, too. These people went for the job before the rules changed. It's like playing Monopoly and halfway through the game, oh, we're going to rewrite the rules. So you kind of blindside all these Christians and then expect them to just fall into line and obey. And it's kind of hard.
But then you still have the choice if they're that dead set against, I can't do this, then you can choose to leave that job.
That's
if
true.
that is now the requirement, you can choose to leave the job. You can ask for, I know there are plenty of jobs within the government, you can say, hey, my religious beliefs prevent me from doing this, I would like it transferred to another position that doesn't conflict with my religious beliefs.
That's very true.
Now,
Okay.
if she wants to make a stand and yeah, if she wants to make a stand and say, this is my religious beliefs here, I'm making a stand for it because this is what I feel is right. Despite, for all intents and purposes, she's a hypocrite. But she wants to make this point here. The judge has given her multiple opportunities to say, all right, we get it, we understand it, we respect it, but you still need to be able to comply with the law. Please either A, issue the certificates, or B, step aside so other people can. And she says, no, I will not. She is now disenfranchising a group of people who want to enter into a contractual relationship with each other and be recognized by the state and the federal government.
I think a lot of that
In other words,
okay, go ahead.
in other words, the judge gave her the opportunity to comply with her religious belief and still allow the law to go forward and still allow people to make their own choice with her not interfering with that legal option. She's choosing not to.
I think a lot.
They're not saying she has to issue the certificate. She can choose to leave.
Right, but I think a lot of people that are on, like, my end of the stick, the Christians, the hardcore belief, are trying to make a stand and a statement to the government because they fear what the Supreme Court ruled shouldn't have been decided by the Supreme Court to begin with. And secondly, there was no democratic vote on it. The people we put in Congress that write the laws never got a say in it. And so they're kind of trying to just make a stand at this point that, look, right, wrong, or indifferent, we want you to know this is how extreme we believe in this, and 8 people in the federal government get to make a decision for the whole country, and it kind of scares people. It's like dictatorship of 8 people versus 1 dictator,
And this is something that we've actually set up here, and we're not saying that I agree with the Supreme Court, because there are a lot of things I completely disagree with them on in the Supreme Court. The whole gay marriage issue to me would have been a completely, it doesn't bother me, why should I care about it? Except, one, because I am an altruistic person by nature, I can empathize with somebody being oppressed because all they want to do is to get married and live the same life that other people are living and do the same things that other people are doing that would be deemed as right. that would be deemed as lawful, productive citizens of the United States of America. That's all they want to do. The only difference with them would be that they chose someone of the same sex, not of the opposite sex. With that said, though, there have been decisions that the Supreme Court has made that have been bad for the society and good for the society. And at the time that those decisions have been made, both sides would say, or even three sides in some cases, would say this is either a very good decision or a very bad decision, or this is kind of a ho-hum decision, but so long as this other decision isn't made, it'll play into it and it should be fine. It happens, and this is part of the evolving process that America goes through. Now, if we can get reasonable people to say, look, you want to be a United States citizen, here are your basic rights as a citizen. As a citizen, you should have this, period. And it should be respected wherever you go that is controlled by the United States, period. This other group wants that same thing without restricting or imposing those same rights on other people. That's it. And if that's all they want to do, that's great. Now, there are trolls that will go around and looking to pick a fight in something else that they shouldn't. And that's only going to cause problems later on. It's whether anybody agrees with a specific religion or religion as a whole, that's a completely different subject altogether. But with the laws that we have here, if you have a right to believe this way that you do, so long as you do not have these beliefs suppressing somebody else who wants to live the same, have the same basic rights as you enjoy, then you're fine. You're okay to do that. Live it the way you want to live it. And that is the implied understanding that the United States of America offers, not just to its citizens, but to everybody else outside of it that wants to become a citizen of this country. And if we can't live up to that ideal that should be protected by the Constitution, then there's a problem with this society. Either it needs to be amended in the Constitution, or the Constitution needs to be enforced.
Okay, now look at another aspect of this, just since you're all here, and you guys are all really, I consider you guys all pretty smart people. And here's something that I question, is community. You choose to live somewhere where you like that environment. If you like the whole surfer outlook, you go live on the beach in California. If you like the whole gay environment, you go live in San Francisco. If you like the Bible Belt theory, you move to the Middle West. At what point does everybody have to accept everybody else's lifestyle? I mean, like the Freedom from Religion group going around attacking the high schools that are having prayer at the football games. Oh, that's a freedom from religion, not freedom of religion. And then at what point does Tulsa, which is pretty much the buckle of the Bible Belt, have to start tolerating gay pride parades through the middle of our streets, or prostitution, or anything else that we consider highly sinful? I mean, do we have to invite every type of lifestyle into our community because it's the law?
I'd like to address this one here first. People who are going against, like, say, for example, the Federation of Christian Athletes. I used to be a member of that group. There are people who are going up against FCA members who hold a private prayer prior to the track meet. Or if somebody after a race wants to kneel down and say a silent prayer, they should be disqualified from that race. That I think is wrong. The problem comes in when you are holding a prayer and somebody does not want to participate for whatever reason, and then you start ostracizing them because they do not want to participate.
Exactly.
That is the problem. That is where there's a legitimate concern, and they should come in and deal with that situation. And that does happen. We've done something on the show here before. Timberwolf was here with me on this one, where we've had a valedictorian who wanted to come out and state that he was gay. He struggled with this thing for years.
I remember that show.
Yes. You talk top grades, hardworking student, people loved him, everything else. He wrote his speech, he passed it by the principal. The principal said, no, you're not allowed to say this, you're not allowed to say this, don't say that you're gay. He revised his speech 3 times. And he said, you're not going to speak if you include that you are homosexual in here. So he was barred from speaking because he just wanted to state who he was. Despite earning it, not just being given to it. He earned the right to be the valedictorian. He met all the requirements, and he was denied because he identifies himself as having a personal lifestyle that the principal of the school disagrees with.
Orientation should not be involved in school anything. The school shouldn't have to put up with any sexual anything being involved in school. You're not supposed to talk about sex in school, period.
Well, hold on, because here's the thing. He's only identifying himself as saying, through the struggles as he had, he's only identifying himself as saying that he identifies with himself as homosexual. He's had to struggle with that throughout his entire school life. And here's his time where he's saying, I'm identifying with myself as this because I'm now comfortable with myself. This is part of his journey.
He doesn't have to do that at the valedictorian speech. The valedictorian speech, the graduation speech, is not about sexual orientation. It's about graduating. It's about education. It's about advancing your future. It has nothing to do with sex.
Well, no, but it also involves a lot of talking about your struggles and stuff. There's a lot of valedictorian speeches that are like, oh, I came from a poor family and I had to work up. If that was a legitimate, thing he had to fight through, that would be part of the speech, or hell, then nobody should be able to talk about anything about themselves. They should only talk about getting good grades and smiling, and that should be the speech, if that's the path.
And honestly,
Now,
I'm going to say... Go ahead.
I'm sorry. I see the principal saying, no, you can't talk about this, as censorship. It is a public forum. He has earned the right to speak. What about freedom of speech?
The freedom of speech is up to the point where it's not being insightful. Him saying, and I quote, oh, and by the way, I'm gay, is not insightful, hateful speech.
Exactly, it's not.
It's just saying this is a part of who I am.
School, though. You don't talk about, okay, if I was to go up and give a speech at a high school, I wouldn't tell people that I used to sell crystal meth to people in high school and I used to bash people's skulls in, even though that's what I did before I became a Christian. That's not the right venue and audience to be talking about that in front of. You're talking to children in a high school.
Actually, people do that in order to show them that you can, no matter what happens to you, you can overcome adversity. You can overcome a negative situation and become a better person. You've obviously done that. And you cite, I'm assuming that you're citing religion as your source of inspiration to become a better person, correct?
Right. But I'm not discuss that with my child or anybody else's kids. That's not
okay. But that's your right to do so long as you do it in a tasteful manner.
It's the parents' right to teach them about sex, drugs, violence, not the other.
But he's not teaching them about sex. He's simply saying that this is an adversity that I had to overcome. It's no different than my saying I am a person with a disability. This is how it affected me, and this is an adversity that I had to overcome.
A choice.
It's not, but that just because it has to do with my sexual orientation. Now, don't say it's a choice, because it's not. Studies have shown, psychological studies, physical studies of brains of homosexuals have shown that the physical brain in homosexuals is different than the physical brain of heterosexuals. There is a physical difference, and that speaks to it not being a choice.
There's studies on every side of every argument. Cans of green beans cause cancer. Cans of green beans don't cause cancer. I don't trust the whole studies.
Well, then we can look at nature and then see these things happening, where we would see animals have homosexual tendencies, or
Exactly.
involve themselves in homosexual acts. I mean, two
Hobos.
dolphins trying to figure out what to do with, the blowhole is a little bit crazy, but it happens. It does happen. Mind you, it happens in different frequencies based off of the population, and you have to go and study a lot of their behaviors and whether they're social creatures or not. But it does happen.
Got a couple dolphins that are gay and a bunch that are straight. The gay ones are not going to reproduce, and therefore the bloodline stops there.
Except that's not how it works,
Basic
though,
common
because if you
sense.
and I heard this politician use this argument beforehand, and then they were told this. Okay, all right, if gay people can't reproduce, how do you get gay people?
Exactly.
The devil corrupts everybody's minds. Same thing with prostitution, drugs, everything. People make choices. They want to live bad lives. It's been around since the beginning of time. People have been killing since the beginning of time, but they weren't born killers. It's a choice.
Well, if it's a choice
Okay,
based off of
but-
who's tenant, though, then we're going back to the fundamental issue here, whether it's somebody's interpretation of a specific religious doctrine that ends up leading these type of decisions to be made. And where we're starting to have a problem with is when it starts encroaching upon other people's lives, where instead of advising you on it, it is now we're going to enforce you on it. Now, I understand where you feel like you are being imposed upon because now homosexual people have the right to live wherever they want to and be married and take part in what you think is an institution that only heterosexuals should take part in. While I understand that, and you understand that your fear is that if this is the line that's being crossed today, what's going to be crossed tomorrow? If we let reasonable people state that, look, every person who is a United States citizen should be treated equally under the law, that includes the same rights that you enjoy to not be fired because you are an older, wiser man, or if you are a person who plays video games, then you are following all the other laws that are in place, you should not be fired. Why should they be fired then just because they have a different lifestyle? What if you sleep on the bed on your left side of the bed and your wife sleeps on the right side of the bed, and there's a religious tenet that states that it should be the opposite way around? You are now a sinner. How are you going to reconcile with that?
Well, whatever you do, it's a basic concept of the American Constitution is whatever you do inside your own home is your business.
Okay, so why should they be judged, and why should they be fired, and why should they be denied the same rights that you and I enjoy?
Because it's not staying inside the home, it's being thrown right in our faces. Gay parades, gay rights, gay this, gay that. It's like, why can't
But
we
you
have
have
a
the
piece of
same
the
right
country
to
where
make
we
a
can have
parade
our
that.
own style and
Well,
not,
here's the. I mean, the
You
Ku Klux
do.
Klan marched around my neighborhood, not that long ago. I pay taxes to people who are openly Klan members. I help pay their salary. While I don't like it, I understand that I can work towards an effort in order to make sure that a greater good occurs. Even if they are against my existence as a human being, there are some laws that are protecting me from them oppressing me or snuffing my life out. I am not going to them and say, because you're a Klansman, I'm going to hang you from a tree to make you feel like that, because then that would put me in the wrong. I should not have the right to oppress them because they want to oppress me.
see,
But
Christians
I should have the right to exist in the same manner that they want to exist.
Yeah, I agree. You should. Everybody has the right to
Okay.
exist and do what they
So-
want. But
Krusty,
communities
you're saying
being able to
that-
separate themselves.
But you're saying, Krusty, that you shouldn't have to deal with a gay pride parade in your street. Well, why not? They go through the permits to get that parade. They go through the legal process of being allowed to do that.
If I
There's
wanted
nothing
to
that says
do-
that your church can't
it-
turn around and
why
do the
do they
same
want-
thing.
But we feel like we're being invaded. Like, we don't go to San Francisco and say, hey, all of you guys should accept the Bible. But they
I've
come
seen
to
there are people
us
that
and
do.
say, hey,
Who
we
says
have to
people who
accept
are
them.
gay have to
Baptist
live in San
church.
Francisco?
We all have to accept
But
them
who
being in the
says
same
people who are
country. But
gay
not,
can only live in San Francisco?
well, whatever
Who says
states.
people who are
accept
gay
it.
can only live in San Francisco? Why can't they live on your street or in your neighborhood,
Why
why
can't I
can't they
go
go to your...
somewhere that I don't have to deal with it? Don't I have that right?
And well, you have
That's
the
called
right
your
to.
home.
Well,
I
you have your
I
home. You
was
have
so-
your sanctuary there. That is your home. You don't have to deal with it inside the walls of your own home. But when you go to work, you don't necessarily know that somebody may be homosexual. You don't necessarily know that somebody likes to do it doggy style instead of missionary. You don't necessarily know that somebody used to be a former meth head and a drug dealer. You don't necessarily know that your boss is stealing from the corporate office, and then you're going to have to pay the repercussions of that later. But you are still going to be a productive member of society the best way that you can be, and following the laws that to the ideal that if you can get to live and enjoy these privileges and you are protected under these laws, then the other people around you should be protected to those same degree that you are. That ends up being the bottom line. And if that is being denied to one specific group because of an arbitrary reason, that's a problem. But if they are coming over here and saying, you know what, we're going to put a gay flag right in front of your driveway. Well, it's not on your property. It's going to be in front of your driveway every single day. And you're going to have to watch that every single day. I will be the first one to say, no, that is wrong. Do not harass him. Get off of his lawn. Don't do that.
Yes, exactly.
But if they want to, if a gay couple wants to move next door to you, and otherwise be a normal couple in every other respect or definition that you have as far as a normal couple would act, except the only difference is that they are homosexual. That shouldn't be a feeling of being imposed upon. That should be like, okay, they're human beings. I don't agree with the lifestyle, but that's them. They're not imposing it on me. They're not trying to force me to live that lifestyle. I personally find two dudes getting it on utterly disgusting, but I'm not going to hold it against them because I find it disgusting. To me, it's the same thing like trying to eat asparagus and spinach wrapped up in fat. It's disgusting to me. I don't like it. But I'm not going to diss somebody for for enjoying that meal.
Okay, but if it's something that's actually described as an abomination and a sin in my religion, and that I have to see every day, then at that point, I'm going to want to move somewhere else.
Then
and then,
you choose to
and then
move
it
somewhere
shows
else.
up again, and I have to move again, and then again. Why can't I have a community that's what I consider a decent community? Why do I have to share every piece of land in the country with 10% of the society that I consider sinful?
Because it's a free country and they have a right to live where they want to too. I mean, you can choose a community that is predominantly this or predominantly that. You can choose to live in a community that
But that's
has
the thing, though, is that they're trying to make all communities
away
not
from the rest
predominantly.
of
There won't be any predominantly Christian communities left. That's our
See,
fear.
The main thing, and this is kind of what we're all forgetting, is the fact that our government specifically exists the way it does to basically do what it needs to get the people, the greater good for the people, everything else inside. The thing is, we have so many different religions in this country that we could sit around here and do this circular debate about, this is wrong for this religion, this is wrong for this religion, and by the time we're done, outside of breathing, I think pretty much everything would be considered bad and would be impositive on that.
right, exactly.
I mean, let's look. We've got some extremist religions that are still part of the religion that, if we were to have to also protect them, holy crap, is all I have to say about it. The thing is, our government was designed to basically tell people, I hate to say it this way, but people that are having religious objectives that we understand, but for the greater good of all y'all, this is what's going to happen. And that's how our government's formed, unfortunately, and that's what it is.
And it also comes down to simply we've become too PC, and What I mean by that, we're too politically correct. We're too afraid of offending people. Everything offends everybody kind of mentality that certain people, certain groups have to feel like they have to walk on eggshells. Certain people just, that, oh, we can't say this because it offends them. We can't believe this because it offends them. And it comes to a point where what we're doing right here, we're voicing our opinions, and it needs to be that way where we can voice our opinions. If you're offended, hey, get over it. It's that person's opinion, not, well, because it offends me, that person now has to go off into hiding or can never speak their mind again. It's way too PC. We're way too worried about offending people and not just, if we believe something, stick by it. Have the backbone to stick behind it. Just like we have with Krusty. Krusty has his beliefs. He has got the backbone to stick behind it. Yes, he's going to offend people with some of his belief system. You know what? Tough shit. It's his belief system.
It's
Just right. I have a different one, and Odin has a different one.
Yes, and because of the different belief systems we all have here, though, we all need to be able to say, look, as adults, as people who want to congregate in a society, whether we agree on everything or not, it is irrelevant so long as we want to be able to build a society where we all benefit. That is the bottom line. If we're all honest about it, all of us here right now are gamers, and we all play the same game. We all in this community. We all enjoy each other's company. We have differences of opinion on a couple different things, but the one thing that we all have, as whether it's expressed or something that's behind the scenes, is implicit. We will respect each other, at the very least, because we are human beings and we are players, and we respect the community that we're in, and we respect the community we're trying to grow. And we will deal with the differences, or at the very least try to understand them. Doesn't mean that we have to agree with them or agree completely with them, but at least we'll get to understand that person. And having these type of discussions coming out helps us to understand the people. I want to understand why Krusty feels that he is being encroached upon, so that we can address those issues. And I'm trusting in him to be reasonable and logical, as well as holding on to his beliefs and saying, look, I think that gay marriage is a sin and it shouldn't happen. Two men or two women shouldn't be together because that is the tenets of my religion. I can say, okay, I disagree with it, but I can understand this here. But taking that argument to somewhere else, the tenets of your religion may make Timber and I look like evil sinners that should be dealt with.
Exactly.
Or the tenets of somebody else's religion will look at you and say, you are a hypocrite and a sinner. How dare you even associate with these people? You should be stoned to death.
Yeah, and that goes with the blanket, because there's so many different variations, somebody will, and I'll use this as my example, I stated this earlier, Westboro Baptist Church. So many people in this country latched onto them as the stereotypical Christian group. That's what they used as their label. Oh, you're a Christian? Oh, you're like Westboro. Everybody latched onto that when they're a very significant minor group. They're their own little cult, and I will use the term cult because of their particular beliefs. But that does not represent other Christians. Krusty has a different variation.
Right.
I have a different variation. The blanket assumptions are so off the wall, and we've seen it with other religious types. We've seen it with other racial types, that it's absolutely appalling. But they all should be separate of one another. Like, if I say I'm a Christian, you shouldn't immediately look at me and say, "Oh, that kind." You should be able to willing to, okay, well, what are your beliefs as a Christian? Because I've heard this other group say this. I'd like to know more about your perspective before I judge you, because that's one of the key things in this country is you go on a title, you go on a skin color, you go on a sexual orientation, and you immediately judge every little thing about them without getting to learn them. And then what does that cause? Separation and hate.
Exactly. I mean, a perfect example of what Timber is talking about. I I'm a person with a disability. I have cerebral palsy. I was born with cerebral palsy. I walk differently. I use a scooter to get around. I've been told by people who claim to be Christians that I must have sinned and I'm being punished by God. And that's why I have cerebral palsy.
Well, I apologize for you going through
Something
that.
that I
would
was
never
born
say
with.
something like that.
You don't, here's the
And I
thing.
know,
You
and
don't need
knowing
to
you,
apologize.
Chrissy, I don't believe you would. You don't need to apologize. Because I understand as a reasonable human being that that is not all Christians. I understand that that is not a major tenet of Christianity. I understand that that is that one person's belief, that one sect's belief. You know, and it
Right.
doesn't apply to everybody in that religion. But the point is that there are tenets within even Christianity that are extreme, and there are ways of interpreting things that can be very restrictive and very offensive to other people. And if I were to blanket all Christians, I mean, good God, I would hate everybody.
On that note,
You know what I mean?
saying that, yeah, anybody saying that, people who are homosexual, people who are married that are gay are equivalent to murderers and rapists and the most abominable things that they can imagine. They're trying to dehumanize them and paint them as this one evil monstrosity. And it's a lot easier to deny people rights and liberties when they're seen as a monstrosity and not as an equal human being like yourself. And therein is the real problem. We need to actually address each other as human beings. If both groups do not want to oppress each other, there's a lot easier time in having a conversation like this without saying, well, you're wrong because you're this and that, and you're evil, and therefore you should be banned or condemned to whatever hell you want to believe in.
Right. Well, Christians the ones I associate with now, that it took me years to find a church that they don't. Thou shalt not judge is a very critical part of our beliefs, and so it's not our job to judge; it's God's job. It's our job to try to teach and to love one another and pray for them. But we look at it as a sinful way of life, like drug addiction or sexual addiction or anything else. It's an addiction to an evil thing, and you try to pray for them to help them to come out of that sin. But it's like, that's why I don't live in LA or Hollywood or all the different vices around the country, that each community embraces different moral standards, and prostitution's perfectly fine and dandy in Nevada. That's what they voted for. That's what they legalized. They all agree on it.
Yeah, I can see that to a degree.
Community have our own way of life without other people forcing us to change.
Now, what happens though when the leaders who are preaching this type of lifestyle are the ones living a different lifestyle altogether that would be seen as sinful?
Then God will judge them.
Okay,
God will punish them. That's His job, not mine.
Then at that point, though, then should these other people be punished for something that is not imposing any sort of wrongdoing to other people or impeding somebody else's life? It may come down to saying, okay, you know what, this is a nuance. I don't want to live around people who are gay. Yeah, I will concede that as your own personal choice, and I'm not going to fight that as your own personal choice. But saying that they should not have the right to marry, that is imposing upon them and denying them a fundamental right that other people have and expect when they grow up and they choose to marry.
Yeah, I believe in states' rights. If you want your state, majority of them agree that that's acceptable, then that's passable there. Why can't each state vote on it?
Well, what happens then if a state says that, hey, you know what, on Saturday nobody should work and nobody should have sex? Do you think that is a
No,
legal?
that's imposing religion, not sexual sexual lifestyle.
Okay, so then how is that any different from saying that two people who want to be together can't be because they are of the same sex and is against the religious tenet of this religion that
Well,
they
you're
shouldn't
right.
enjoy these rights?
Right, legal rights, yeah, everybody should have, and it's just it's not that we don't think they should have rights. It's fear of encroachment. You know, of when does our community finally get, hey, a little barrier that says, hey, our group, our society here doesn't have to change, and it's just scary. I don't know. I don't really know how to describe it. It's just.
Well, you're being honest with us. You're feeling that you're going to be encroached upon at some point, and you feel that your rights are going to be either suppressed or eroded, or you may even be denied the right to live
It's
with
like
the same.
prostitution. It doesn't hurt anybody. It's perfectly fine, but in religious view, it destroys marriages and this and that, and therefore we don't like it. No. But it's a freedom of choice. If you want prostitution, live in a state that's legal in. Gambling, same thing. I mean, why can't it be states have their own choice of lifestyle?
Well, except there's a problem with that when you were equating a function or a profession to the rights of an individual human being to enter into a legally binding agreement with another human being, and that is being oppressed. We still don't even have issues to deal with the laws that state that if you are identified as homosexual or even implied as being homosexual, you could be fired from your job. Those still exist, and they're based off of religious doctrine.
Well, I
Those are
understand.
state laws off of that. There's nothing in there that states that, okay, we have this law in place because this is something here that will protect us. Child molesters, for example. Child molesters are people who will do things to children against the will of the children, against the parents' will to protect the children. That is something that needs to be dealt with legally. That is a problem. And whether it's they have a neurochemical disorder or if they are just purely evil, they need to be dealt with. Laws need to be written to deal with those people. When you
Well,
have...
it's
Go
a
on.
warped state of mind. From our point of view, or from mine anyways, I'm not going to speak for anybody else because a lot of my own friends think I'm crazy. Um, but
Don't worry, we have friends who all think all of us are crazy. So
yeah, but child molesters, whether they act it out or not, people who have the urge to be with children, that's a sinful thought process. Men who want to sleep with men, that's a sinful thought process. Urges that people act on, when they act on them, they become a sin. They're immoral urges. Prostitution, having sex for money, that's a choice.
But if I remember correctly, it was the Apostle Paul who also said that, and I'm just paraphrasing here, that even the thought of having these type of interactions with somebody else, you've already committed a sinful act within your heart. Yeah, if you thought about coveting
So
your
you gotta
neighbor's
pray
wife,
about
you've
it.
already committed a sin. Done. So that's there on impulse.
But it's
That's
not condemning. It's you pray for forgiveness and you pray for God to heal you and change your. You make a choice. You either want to do it or you don't want to do it.
But there are some people in other religions, or even the same major religion as Christianity, but a different denomination, who would look at this and say, "Nope, sorry, you're done. You're done. You messed up. You thought wrong. You're done. You should be stoned to death, or you should be excommunicated."
Yeah.
How is their
those are
religious
scary.
difference? How is their religious belief any different than yours? Who
Is there
should supersede who?
humans carrying out judgment instead of their deity?
Okay, so then why should there be a law restricting the rights of one human being to be with another human being legally and enjoy the same legal protections in this country that other people enjoy? You can't be fired because you married a redheaded woman. Why should you be fired because you married a man?
I understand what you're saying. I agree. There shouldn't be legal ramifications for any of that. It's just when do I get to live in good old-fashioned American values again?
Well, it depends on which side of the fence you're on here. You know that you feel that you're losing power, and nobody likes to lose power. We'll put this in gaming terms. You are so used to using the anti-proton weapons, for example, and they've always been this strong. Now suddenly they want to take a mod away that has been performing well that you're used to for so long. And the reason they did that is because they could not bring it to all the other weapons that should have had it in the first place. You feel that you are being encroached upon, correct?
Yeah, I guess.
You've had something
rules
that you
changed
should
out
have.
from under you. Right.
You should have had that, and by all rights, you should have had that. But because it couldn't be given to other people, I mean, this is kind of a semi-bad analogy, but here's what's going to happen. It was taken away from you. You felt like it was taken away from you. But instead, what was done in the background is that, okay, it's not going to be explicitly stated that you have this and other people do not. Instead, they did a fix behind the scenes so that everybody gets it, and it is now the baseline for where your favorite weapon and everybody else's weapon should have this. It is not explicitly stated, but is now implicitly rolled into that weapon, so everybody has it now. But externally, it looks like you've lost that mod that made your weapon better.
Okay. Right. I see what you're saying.
It's kind of an off analogy, but it's so long as you get the message,
right.
It's there.
Okay. Well, here's the difference. If you're raised, say doing any drug was perfectly legal, the federal government legalized everything, and you're raised in a home and in a town where everybody was shooting up heroin, and you saw it constantly, and it was perfectly fine, and people went to work and did their jobs and came home and still shot up heroin, and it was seen everywhere. Eventually you're going to try it. You're bombarded with that in your face. Everybody's doing it. Everything, you see it everywhere you turn. You're doing it too. Like if you're raised in a house full of alcoholics, you eventually start drinking too. Even if it's temporarily, everybody does it. If you want to raise your family in an environment where you don't see power drinking going on all the time, or shooting up heroin all the time, or the prostitution or gay stuff or any of that stuff that we consider bad, so that your children aren't raised with that bombarded in their face every day, how am I supposed to protect my children, or how am I supposed to provide a life where they're not being constantly bombarded by what liberal society has deemed everybody should deal with, if I don't want to deal with it, and I don't want my family to have to deal with it?
But that's the thing. We live in a country where everyone has the freedom to live the life that they choose within
Except Christians.
the laws that are agreed upon. You have the right to live the life that you choose. You have the right to choose to believe what you want to believe. You have the right to choose to believe that you don't agree with this or you don't agree with that, that you want to live a certain way.
Be legal everywhere.
But then it's legal everywhere. You teach your children you do not believe this is right. But that doesn't mean that you shield them from it and they never see it. It just means you teach them this is something that I believe, that we believe as a family or in our religion is wrong, and we do not agree with this. But you can't completely and totally guard them from it all of their lives.
You could be
At some
teaching them
point,
one
they're
thing
going
at
to
home,
see it.
and the teachers at school are going to be teaching them something totally different at school. This is legal, so it's okay. You can do what you want.
we simply, first of all, teachers at school, I don't know where people get the idea that we teach morality at school, other than that you follow the directions of the laws that are, given in our society. You follow the directions of the teachers. You get along with people. You don't hit other people. I mean, other than that, we don't teach. And I'm speaking as a teacher here, as someone who was in the elementary classroom for 9 years. We do not teach that Susie has 2 mothers. Okay? We do not teach that this is okay, and if you believe that it's not, then you're wrong. We don't shove it in their face. We simply say there are many different types of families and leave it at that.
They got a couple of cases going on right now where they're trying to put unisex bathrooms and locker rooms in the schools, stuff like that. It's happening.
And I will counter with this, where this has been happening for decades, and I deal with this over in Lake County, Florida, where we have some teachers who will want to teach creationism in the schools, that the earth is 6,000 to 10,000 years old, that man was created out of the dust of the earth, and that woman was created from the rib of a man, and that evolution does not exist. And that is so factually wrong on so many fronts. It literally will interfere with the progression of our society, not meaning social progression as far as liberalism versus conservatism. We're talking about progression as far as scientific knowledge, as far as being able to say how we can deal with cancer, deal with other different diseases, both genetic as well as diseases that are viral or bacterial in nature. We literally are interfering with the future of our own society in teaching this. And even though it is against the law, people still teach it, and other people who have strong religious convictions will want to disregard the law or give waivers to these people to let them teach this. So if you don't want...
That comes down to separation of church and state, with creationism being taught in public schools. If you want your kids to learn creationism, send them to a private school that teaches creationism. And it's perfectly okay for that private school to teach that.
I fully agree with you guys on that. I do not believe religion should be taught at school. I agree.
Well, if the religion shouldn't be taught at a public school, then why should a religious value be imposed in a public courtroom or in a public clerk of courts?
And which religious value is that? The
marriage thing?
Should we impose Sharia law at this point? I mean, we can impose Sharia law at some point.
No, that would contradict the U.S. Constitution, because Sharia law stones people to death and beheads them and this and that.
So, because we disagree with the punishment, we should restrict the law?
No, any religion that acts out its own judgment on mankind can't be enforced in the United States. Only the government decides what's a felony-style crime and should be punished for. Murder, blah, 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 whatever's decided. But teaching that because a relatively minor percentage of America believes that, oh, it's perfectly normal to be gay and it's not a choice, you're born that way, the majority of the country does not believe that. But we're still supposed to accept that our children are going to understand that's a fact, when it's actually two different opinions on both sides of that nobody really knows.
The majority of the country does not understand. Hold on a second. Okay. The majority of the country does not understand evolution. They don't believe in evolution. That doesn't mean that evolution doesn't happen. If the majority of the country doesn't believe in gravity, does that mean that a gravitational attractive force does not happen? That there's no curvature of space-time, so that we're mass or a concentrated form of energy?
We're not basing laws on gravity.
We actually do base laws on gravity, to the point where we could put satellites in orbit around the Earth and benefit from it. We actually do base laws on gravity as far as how, when, and where airplanes can land and take off. We do have laws on gravity as far as how much cars can weigh and which trucks can and cannot drive on certain roads or highways. We
Okay,
base
we're
our
talking
own laws
about-
off of gravity.
Okay, but morally speaking, laws, morally non-agreed upon moral things shouldn't be discussed in schools at all.
Well, all right, then let's go
Well,
back a
yeah.
couple. Okay, let's go back. All right,
And-
go on, go on,
I
go on,
want
go
to
on.
say something
And
about
this-
because this is a big morality thing, and I want to say this. The thing is about the whole thing is schools and stuff are about exposure. A little while back, a group of people got together and got Looney Tunes banned from the air because they said it was making fun of people with speech impediments. I have a speech impediment, and I can say I was actually more educated to be able to deal with people that talked like that than not. There was actually a study that, yeah, bullying actually went up with people that had speech impediments because people weren't being exposed to it. You know, people have said it here, and Christian people says this here. Everything is a personal choice. So even if you're a child, at some point in time, you get to make a personal choice. Your parents don't necessarily get to tell you X, Y, Z. You can say, I want to do this, that, or the other thing. So exposing people to as much knowledge as possible and letting them work it out, and then, you know, when they die, if they're at the pearly gates and they're right or wrong, you know, that's in whoever's hands at that point in time. But what we're all kind of doing here is we're doing that self-defeating thing where we're like, well, everybody needs to make a personal choice, but it should be this personal choice. It's like, no, tell them everything they need to know, and then when they can get a good, well, okay, good might be a bad term, but when they can make their own personal choice of what they want to do, that's where we need to be at in a society. Like Timber said earlier, we are so PC'd on everything that people aren't being exposed to the realities of the world. I'll be honest. I went to a Catholic college, and I had classmates that had never ever seen an African American before in person in their real lives, and they didn't really know how to deal with them other than what they've seen on TV with all the faux shizzles and everything like that. And I can't tell you how awkward that was. The thing is, everybody needs to be educated as much as possible on what exists in the world, because when you're educated, you're not fearful from it. When you're not fearful from it, you don't want to get rid of it because then you just understand it. How many things would we not have if we just let fear completely dominate our entire thing? Like, you know, we were told for the longest time, man shouldn't fly. We don't have wings. We have no reason to fly. We should be fearful from that. But we wouldn't be sitting here right now having this conversation if the Wright brothers didn't say, you know what, screw you guys, we're gonna do it anyway. So, you know, there are people that are gonna say no, 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 but you know, as a person, you have a personal choice. I have a friend that's Christian that explained to me his views on what the sins are and what the laws are they are self-governing laws to you and how you should live your life. And if other people don't live your life, you know, pray for them and hope for the best for them. But as long as you stick to your path, you're sticking to your path, and everything's hunky-dory. And yeah, stuff that you may not like is, you know, in your face, but, you know, it's up to you to protect yourself, not necessarily a governing body to say, yes, no, maybe so, turtles, I like turtles.
I think the overall point is that if we start oppressing one group, you know, that opens the door for some other group to come in and possibly oppress you. And when one group is being oppressed, they're not in a position of power or authority or have the resources or capability to be able to help you fight off the other oppressor. So if some group that claims that they are with some gay association that's going to stamp out every single person who has a religious belief that disagrees with their lifestyle and impose on their life so that they can't go to their work, they can't go to the park, they can't go shopping, they can't sit back in the comfort of their home and relax or read or watch TV or whatever it is, and they want to impose upon your rights to live and to enjoy everything else that they're trying to enjoy, I will be the first one to say, that is wrong, stop it. Should be stopped.
Right. Now, my argument would be that your rights extend only until the point where they begin interfering with somebody else's rights. So you've asked Krusty, well, where can I go where I don't have to live near these people? Well, the answer is, there, to my knowledge, you can't. Because the second you say, well, I live here, you can't live next door to me, you're now encroaching on the rights of somebody else. You know, I mean,
I see what you're saying.
it's, you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
You can't. You have to learn how to live within the community that's within the country, the reality that is the world. And that means that you may be confronted with things that you don't like. And the test is, or the challenge to me is how you handle that. Okay? You may not agree with their lifestyle, but do you choose to oppress them, or do you choose to say, that's their lifestyle, I pray for them, I hope they do well, but it's not my choice.
Okay,
Now
well,
that-
then, at
go
a
on,
certain
go on.
point, though, there has to be protection, because there are groups that are going way beyond that. You know, your freedom from religion groups going around attacking every school in the country that has a church prayer at
And
the
they
football
should be
game.
and they should be stopped
now-
if they are honestly violating somebody else's rights to
Christians-
exercise that.
Christians-
As a former president of the Federation of
No.
Christian Athletes and leading See You at the Pole at my high school, I would say anybody who wants to stop a body of students from assembling and exercising their religious beliefs without imposing their beliefs on any other student, or suppressing the religious exercise of any other student in the equal settings that we have and enjoy, that is wrong. I've invited Muslim students and Jewish students to come pray with the Christians, and so we can have an interfaith prayer. See You at the Pole. So it's not just a Christian thing, but to be inclusive for others, even if we have specific disagreements on what tenets are to be followed and to what degree. We're saying we are a part of a community. We are this body. We are all in this together for one way or another. That's there. As a secular human being now,
And
I would still say if students want to exercise that right to assemble peacefully at a time that is allowed by one group, then another group of a different religion should also have the same rights and liberties to do so as well. And I would say that is their right as students to do that, even if I disagree with their intent or what they believe in. I say that's their right to do so. So if some group comes over saying at a track meet, you know, these students want to pray and they're not ostracizing the people who don't share their religion, then leave them be. Let them be there. They will include the other students, or they're part of that. And the other students could have that respect to say, that's what they do. We respect that. They respect us. We're here together as a team. We're athletes. We do this. This is great. Don't start shutting them down. Because once you start doing that, then they're oppressed. And then I have a problem with that.
the argument there, as I understand it, from these freedom from religion people, is something more like, and sometimes I do feel this way, where I don't follow a religion. I don't go to church. I don't identify myself as Christian or religious or even spiritual. I choose not to do that. So if you want to go off and pray, as you know, if you're on the team and you want to host a prayer before you go out on the field, that's fine. If you choose to, if you tell me that I have to take part in that, then I have a problem. And that, as I understand it, is where the problem stems from, is that the problem is that the coach is saying, okay, everybody, hold hands, now we're going to pray, and not giving those that don't want to participate the chance to not participate. And, I mean, you know, I'll be honest, my family, my husband's family, is a very religious family. Every week, I go over to his grandmother's house, I sit with him, we have a family dinner, and every week we start that dinner with a prayer. I am very uncomfortable with that. I don't like it. I don't like bowing my head. I don't like having to hold my head. I don't like having to be, to be forced to participate, to what I feel forced to participate in that. I really don't like it. I do it because it's a family thing. Okay? But if you're going to tell me that I have to do that because I'm part of this sports team at a public high school, hell no.
Well, a lot of that,
Hell no, I have to.
I agree with you. You know, you don't have to do whatever you don't want to do. I mean,
I think
It's-
it comes down to if you're being treated differently from what you should be because somebody found out something else about you that's different from that group. That's where the problem comes into. And rolling everything back to what's going on here in Kentucky and then by extension what's happening in some areas of public service is that we see somebody's bias coming in and trying to change the laws to a point where they're infringing upon somebody else's rights for no other reason other than I disagree with what they're doing. They're trying to be a citizen and they're trying to enjoy the rights and liberties that other people enjoy, then leave them be. You disagree with it? That's good. You have the right to disagree with it. You don't have the right to stop them from trying to live the same life that you're trying to live.
yeah, it still falls back to the community thing, though. I mean, it's like everybody's being forced to be assimilated into the liberal agenda. You know, everybody has to accept gays. Everybody has to accept this. Sin everywhere. It's part of life. Fact of it. Deal with it. Suffer if you don't like it. It's like being rammed down our throats, and it really is scary.
Well, look at the history of America and look at how quickly it's changed. It wasn't that long ago where the exact same argument was being made for people who are of a different skin color.
And that
That's the
was
truth.
unchristian too.
Pardon?
That was unchristian too. Racism is against the Bible highly.
Well,
Christians
but
didn't like that
there are
either.
plenty of places within the Bible. If you are of a different tribe, and you do not believe in the same God as they do, you are to be slaughtered and killed. And some people took that to be, okay, you are now of the same tribe as us. You are not white and of this descent. You either are ostracized, suppressed, or killed. And they would hold picnics in doing that. And it didn't just happen
Yeah,
to black people too.
there are even groups of Christians that believe that black skin is the mark of Cain.
Yeah,
So
see,
then,
that's
I
wrong
mean, you
too.
see what I'm saying? You
Yes.
could use religion to
The
justify
apostles,
it.
yeah, but the apostles taught that all the Gentiles are welcome to God's fold. All. And the Jews that conformed to Christianity were the original Christians, and they opened the doors to all Gentiles. Anybody can come to God. Jesus said, everybody, love one another, love their brother, pray for each other. There was no color involved. The governments made the color issue over finances, money, greed, corporation. Slavery was a money thing. That's all it was. It was evil greed.
It started out as a money thing. In this society, it transformed into a we are a superior being versus over this other being here because we've held power for so long.
That's every society. I mean, Babylonians had slaves. The Jews were slaves to Egyptians, which
Right, and then the Jews also had slaves, but there was something distinctly different with this one that was different for some other areas. Now, mind you, this is not to say that it only existed in America. It's just that it took on a different form than it did in Africa. Well, you have tribes there that would say one tribe is superior to another tribe, and they would start killing each other off. They would commit genocide. That's wrong too.
See, and as a Christians, we see all those different perversions of how to treat one another as the act of the devil. Every great empire that has fallen because of that, and as Christian Americans, we fear that the more wicked this country becomes, the more our nation's in peril. So, I mean, there's that fear from our love of God that we see society just crumbling beneath us. trying to take a stand, and we call them hypocrites for it. It's like, what are we supposed to do?
Well, and here's where I would come up and say this. I mean, and we're gonna give each person here a couple minutes to wrap up, because we went a little bit over the time. No, but not to say that this wasn't an interesting conversation. It was awesome, but it's just we got to wrap this up at some point here. But just to go back to that point, it's who gets to be the judge and the arbiter of who sets the laws when you have so many different denominations that want to exercise their own beliefs and their own laws that are slightly different than the other one, and that say, okay, well, you who believe in this way is correct, but you who slightly differ from this following, you're wrong, and you should not get cast with the other group. Where does it stop? We need a set of laws that will guarantee that every citizen here has these baseline rights that cannot be suppressed, that should not be removed from them, and they get to enjoy these privileges here that every other person gets to enjoy at the very fundamental level. That is part of the framework in the Constitution. And if these rights aren't being distributed equally among people, then that's something that needs to be corrected. Because if they do not have the same opportunities to be able to live their life in the same manner you choose to live your life, then that's a problem, and that would be a detriment to the society in the long term. In the short term, it's like, oh yeah, they're losers because they couldn't do this, or oh well, they can't get married. Who cares about that? But there are big implications to this that later on down the road, this could affect somebody in your lineage, whether directly or indirectly, and then they will have to pay for that consequence. So it's something where we say all of our citizens should be given this basic level of respect, this basic level of treatment. And then from there on, if they choose to not be productive members of society, that's on them. If they choose to try and suppress somebody else's right to live, that's on them. We should have laws that would take care of those circumstances to protect the people and have the will of the majority without suppressing the rights of the minority. That's how it should be. In practice, it's been rough around the edges. Over time, it seems to try and correct itself. That's what some people call progression or a progressive mentality. And for some people, they see it as, great, I'm gaining the respect now that I should have had, like these other people have had and enjoyed. For other people, they see that as, well, I'm losing my ground now, my power and influence, because now these are the people that I disagree with are able to live in my neighborhood, are able to go to the same schools that my son or daughter go to, are able to run for public office, are able to hold corporate positions. I have to go work for them now. What gives? So long as they're not oppressing you or your offspring, that shouldn't be an issue. But if you feel like it's a personal sin for that, okay, that's your opinion. You have the right to hold that opinion. And I respect that the same right to hold that opinion as I say that I have a right to believe that some things should be done in this country to make sure that nobody who's crazy gets to be in public office, period. And by crazy, I mean believing in things that would oppress other people. I have that right to think that way. Now, is my right to think that way suppressing somebody else from running for public office if I'm not putting that into action? No. Is your right to think that two men or two women living together is a sin oppressing them from living together? The answer is no. It becomes a problem when you are in a position of power and then you say, I don't care what the laws of the land are, I don't care what the Constitution says, you two are not going to get to live together because I believe that you shouldn't live together. And if that gets to fly, then other arbitrary things get to come into the picture and be passed off as, well, this is now the new law. You are blonde-haired, you can't marry your red-headed wife. Why? Because I said so and I'm in a position of power. Forget your guaranteed basic level of rights. Out the window because I say so. That's the problem that I have and other people have, and that should be something of a concern for you, because when you feel like you're being encroached upon, the day that you're actually being encroached upon, you want somebody to come in and say, look, this is wrong, and I'm not in a position of power, but I want other people in a position of power to step up and say, hey, this is wrong too, let's fix it and protect you.
Yeah, there's a lot to think about.
It is a lot to think about, and people need to understand not just where we're coming from, but where you're coming from as well. Even if we don't agree with the fundamental beliefs that you have and that where you're coming from, we can understand what you're trying to say and say, okay, well then let's have the discussion and try to explain to you, no, this shouldn't be the case. No, people shouldn't be beating down church doors to try and make the church do something that is against the church doctrine, whether I believe in the church or not. At that same token, nobody should be beating down the clerk of courts to stop them from issuing license certificates to legal citizens who are trying to do a legal thing. And there should be a protection that stops both sides from there. You want to have that respect? Good. Other people need to have that respect as well too. On the flip side, and if it can't go one way, the problem is that, and history has shown this, over time, you keep pushing that pendulum, it's going to start pushing back against you. And we don't want that. We want to be able to prevent that from happening so that we won't have to go through the same fight over and over and over again and just switch sides or have to go through this for somebody else. Because I sure as heck don't want to say, even though I disagree again with religion, I don't want to start having to put up time and energy to start defending people who believe in a certain faith and who are not causing harm or the breakdown of society against other people here. Because when that happens, then something else could come in later on and then start affecting us. I don't want that. Any closing words before we just wrap up?
No, but this discussion reminds me of how they described the Founding Fathers hashing out the Constitution.
It wasn't easy.
Civil debate, discussing points of views.
Yep, exactly.
It's a lot of
The
fun.
bear arms. How could anyone get that confused? Everyone should have a pair of bear arms in their house. Love that part on Family Guy. It's so good.
The furrier, the better.
The one thing I will say, because a lot of this is we do want to we are kind of wanting as a society to look for the happy little balance where all the groups can be happy and intermix. As much as I'm gonna say it, like, let's look at Star Trek. We all play Star Trek Online. Obviously, a lot of things we do come from there. Look at Deep Space Nine as a series in general. You have the Bajorans, which are a really, really strongly religious race of people, having to interact with more or less a lot of other races that have abandoned religion for science in general. And yeah, there's a lot of fighting back in here, but overall, they work just fine together. I mean, yeah, it's a scripted show, whatever, but I mean, that's kind of like where what direction we should be moving towards, where it's like, we understand you have your religion and your beliefs, and we have our, for lack of better words, basically because how the show is, our science and our our beliefs, because to the Bajorans the um the wormhole is the celestial temple and the things inside are the prophets. To the Federation, it's a wormhole to the Gamma Quadrant and aliens that are just so much more advanced than us that we may never actually understand them, and that's why they seem like deities. But that's kind of the thing where I feel like we could take a lot from the show that created the game that we all met on, is that there is somewhere in this world, I hope, the balance
For
that
both of you.
people are going to fight and there's going to be a disagreement here and there, but overall it will work and it will be beautiful when it does.
Can I throw
I
out a
think I
different Star Trek
Go on.
view? How
Go on.
about looking at it like the crystalline catastrophe, whatever it's called? You got Romulans, you got Klingons, and you got Federation all fighting together to kill the crystalline catastrophe, or whatever it is, snowflake. But they don't all go live in the same neighborhood afterwards. Klingons are not going to get along with Federations. They kill each other if they were next door neighbors. You don't force them to live next door to each other. My point of view. That's all.
Yeah,
But Worf lived. But Worf lived with the humans
One.
on Enterprise,
One
and
day.
there were plenty of
It
other
takes
aliens
one.
that lived on. It only takes one, right? I mean, they didn't say you can't.
Right, but they didn't go and just
They never
everybody
said
move into the Klingon
you
Empire's
can't
homeland
live
and say, hey, we're moving in.
And okay, but
Well-
what about the fact that even on Star Trek Online, you said Romulans and Klingons don't live together? You can walk on Kronos right now, find a bench with two Romulans sitting there, two Romulan NPCs, sitting there going, I never thought we'd be freely chatting on Kronos. Okay,
I'm just,
the
yeah.
point is that they are intermixing.
To
They're
the point where they're
not
having offspring.
separating and saying, right, and they're not
they're not
separating and
making
saying,
the
we're going to fight
Klingons-
together, but we're not going to live. They're not making it, but they're not saying you can't either, and that's the point. They're
And I
not
think
saying
that-
only Klingons can live here, only Romulans can live here.
Okay,
I
right.
think
But the Klingon belief that you fight for honor to the death over dinner, or a disagreement over this or that, isn't acceptable in the Federation beliefs, but they're still allies. So you're not forcing them to accept each other's lifestyles.
Right, but
No,
that's
but they
also
do respect each other's lifestyles and don't force each other not to practice their lifestyles.
exactly, and you also see them at the very beginnings of their interaction. Some people may say, "Oh, wow, 100 years is a long time." Really, in as far as civilizations are concerned, 100 years is a bat of the eye. You blink, and you could see how much it's changed over in 100 years. From people who were warring against each other to people who are just starting to respect each other. You see parallels in the way the stories were written to be a reflection of what we're going through here in humanity. And for what Tank said earlier, we hope that we have humanity who are coming together, who have different opinions, different religions, different cultural backgrounds, but yet we can work together. We do see that a lot in this country, and it's one of the reasons that we tout this so much, whether we're conservative or liberal. We tout that we have this country here that has a mix of different cultures, and in some cases, those cultures cross birth locations, color, skin color or skin pigmentation, whatever culture you were brought up with, you either absorb it or adopt another one. It happens, and we're seeing that changing within the last 60 some odd years. Who knows what the next 100 years is going to go, so long as we don't have the extremes on both sides calling the shots and getting so much airtime that everybody else believes, well, these guys are the ones who are the loudest, I guess this must be the way it is. It's not. When I'm one of my best friends, and I've seem really bad at this, but one of my best friends is diehard Christian. He understands where I come from. I understand where he comes from. and we look at it. We honestly have a nice sit down like what we're doing here right now, and we have this discussion, and we go through and say, well, how can you reconcile this? And he's asking, well, how can I reconcile this? And we try to understand each other's viewpoint. And in the understanding of each other's viewpoint doesn't necessarily change our own viewpoint, but we learn to respect each other, have a deeper respect for each other, so that whenever there's a time of crisis and you're trying to figure out why is he suffering here mentally with this situation, you get to understand it. Then you can talk to him and you can help him out. And when you help out another human being, that helps you become a better human being, not just morally, but also physically and mentally, because there may be a time period in the future where you need help or your offspring needs help, and they're there to help you or your offspring. And that's how we build societies, and that's how we protect our species. Without this, we break off and we die. We lose our greatest power, is being able to work together in groups. And I'm going to shut up now.
I'm with y'all.
And to further, and Chrissy, just to further your metaphor on the intermixing and saying we fight the crystalline entity and blah blah blah, but then we all go to our separate places. Well, if you look at Deep Space Nine, Klingons, Bajorans, Federation, all in one place,
Yeah, I don't like
living
this.
together. And yeah, they had their differences. Yeah,
like
they
my-
sometimes had their differences, and it wasn't all smooth sailing, but they did respect each other and respect the fact that Klingons have the right to be Klingon and to practice Klingon beliefs. Bajorans have the right to be Bajoran and practice Bajoran beliefs. Federation have the right to be, human and other races and practice their own beliefs. And that's all we're saying. Is that the way I see it is it's a matter of mutual respect. You don't have to agree with what they're doing, but they do have the right to do it.
Yeah, they do. And at the end of the day, if they don't like it, they can go back to their home world where they're comfortable. Right?
If they
So
feel
in
the
that
need to do
analogy,
so.
your home world would be your own home.
Oklahoma.
Would be your own home where you don't have to invite them into your house. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't.
I
But
want
you
the
can't
whole
say
thing
they
on
can't
time.
live on your street, or can't go to your school, or can't. Okay, you see what I'm saying?
I'm seeing the Klingons aren't going to change their ways on their home world. They're just accepting your ways in your world. When they're visiting you, when you're in Rome, do like the Romans do. Fine. That's their choice. But when I go back home, don't try to make me change my beliefs.
Okay, nobody's asking you to change your views.
Well, no, but I'm saying,
No reasonable
I want my
person is
home
gonna ask you to
community
change
to
your
be
views.
my home community the way I like it. Peaceful, clean, quiet.
Okay, that's fine. And you and everybody else who wants to live there would like to have it peaceful, clean, and quiet. That's fine. But if it so happens that, a gay couple, one black guy, one white guy, move into the neighborhood, is the person 3 blocks down going to complain not because they're gay, but because they're interracial?
If it makes the community uncomfortable, then you've caused a disruption, and it's bad.
But is that a reasonable expectation of discomfort?
But then where is the problem? Is the problem with them just for existing and being and wanting to be
It's
in that community? They like the street, they like the area, maybe they like the property values. I mean,
it's
there's
like
a
when
number of
strip
different
club
reasons.
gets upset because they can't build their strip club next to a high school.
Oh, I don't want anybody to build a strip club next to a high school.
I don't want a gay
It's
club
a
next
bad
to
idea, honestly.
I'm just saying that it's that uncomfortable. You want your personal space, your barrier, your community, your neighborhood nice the way it stays. Want it to stay the way it is.
Okay, well then, define what the way it is. Is there a segment of society that you should say should not exist there because if they're not trying to open a strip mall or with strip clubs all across the strip mall, go buy a handbag and get a lap dance for free. It's here's two people that want to live here, or one person that wants to live here in this neighborhood because it has a nice property value, a nice view. They like the quiet. They like to keep things clean. They like to be able to go to a coffee shop and have some coffee and read a book, and then go home and go to sleep. And then eventually one day they find somebody they fall in love with and get married, and they just want to settle down and have a kid. So far everything's good, right?
Yeah.
I think that's it.
I understand what you guys are saying. I don't wish any bad things on anybody. I just want my neighborhood to stay the way it is.
I think and I
I
honestly
left
think that
sinful areas to come to a nice, peaceful Christian neighborhood, and I just want to leave it the way it is. Why is that a problem?
shouldn't be a problem.
Leave
Honestly,
it
shouldn't
alone
be a
is all
problem.
I'm asking.
Okay, all right, and it shouldn't be a problem.
Not, verbally. I'm just saying,
Right. I know, and honestly, that should not be a problem at all. That should not be a problem at all.
I drove 2,000 miles to get away from everything, and now it's following me here.
Well, it's. And I think that's something else that we're
That's
going to
the
have to
thing,
deal
though,
with.
Krusty. The thing, though, Krusty, is it's always been there. It's always been there. It's just that the
Not in my
issue
face,
is
it
more apparent at the moment.
Yeah,
It's just
now
that
it's
the
in
issue
my
is
face.
more apparent at the moment. That doesn't mean that it hasn't always been there.
Right,
It's
but I
always
didn't
been there. There have always been gay people in your community.
Right, but I didn't have to.
There have always been gay people in your community.
You're
And you
missing
won't have to hear about it forever.
I'm
And
hearing
you won't have to hear about it forever. It's a hot button issue now.
it's in our face. Like it.
For the time being, because it's something that just changed. Eventually the dust will settle and things will go back to
9 politicians
seemingly back
decided
to the way they were before, where it's not in your face.
I understand what you guys are saying. I'm uncomfortable. That's all.
And if that makes you uncomfortable, you have the right to express that as being uncomfortable. You have the right to express that saying, I don't believe in this nature because according to the tenets of my religion, this is sinful. That's your belief. Fine, you get to be respected for that belief. At the same token, if you're going to be respected for that belief, then you also have to respect the rights of somebody else to be able to live within their own belief. That does not impose upon you in such a way that causes you to not be able to live your life. And that doesn't mean, oh, look, I just saw somebody there and they kind of look gay, that makes me repulsed, sort of thing. But it's like, I'm going to put a big gay pride flag in front of your face every day 24/7. You do not deserve that right. No more than that, you do not deserve that situation from happening to you. No more than they deserve somebody thumping a book in their face and saying that they're going to go to hell.
Right. It's like the gangbangers walking around with their pants half down. I don't want my daughter to have to stare at other men's underwear all day. I see that as indecent exposure, but the law says, hey, they can dress how they want. I'm forced to deal with that too. It's a lot of things in society are changing drastically, and it's just making Christians feel like they're being driven out of their own country. We have to go somewhere else to be comfortable again. Why? We were here first. I mean, not here first in the country, but it was like we built this town, we paid our taxes, we built it the way we wanted it, and now we're having to change.
But the thing is, so did the people that you're saying are behaving in a way that you find sinful.
Right, I didn't go move in next door to them and say, hey, deal with me. I'm leaving them alone.
Well, here's the thing. How do you know that?
Well, Exactly. At some point, you were not a member of the community that you are a member of now. Right, but when you came to the community you are in now, you came to that community, you moved in there, and you basically said to the community, hey, here I am, deal with me.
I moved to a community of like-minded individuals.
How do you know they're all like-minded?
I know the majority of them are like-minded. That's all I know, and I'm happy with that. I moved to a place where I felt comfortable.
Okay.
That's all.
Here's what we're trying to build up to, though.
When I was dealing drugs, I was comfortable in the Phoenix Valley, and that's where I liked being. When I went sober and became a Christian, I moved to a Christian neighborhood. And that's all I'm saying, is I'd like it to stay a predominantly Christian neighborhood. It's peaceful.
And I understand that, but when something, like, say, for example, you go into this predominantly Christian neighborhood, that predominantly does not mean everybody's a Christian, but the majority of them are Christians there.
Right.
Now, what if one of these Christians so happens to be your next door neighbor, divorce his wife, and then marries a man?
As long as he's not kissing them in front of my daughter or doing anything weird around us that I have to see in my face, and I'm sitting out on my yard on my lawn chair relaxing, I don't care. I just don't want it in my face all the time. I don't want my children to see anything.
That is, and it's going to surprise a lot of people, say that is actually a reasonable response, because there are some people who don't even want to see heterosexual couples kiss in the front of their lawn.
Public display of affection, exactly. Yes.
Yeah, they don't want to see that.
Right. What you do in your own home's your own business. If I'm having 5 wives in Utah in my own home, that's my choice. Whatever. Each person's life is fine. Whatever is acceptable in that community is fine. It's choice. It's each state's rights. Everybody's.
The argument comes down to, okay, that is your right to be able to go and live with like-minded individuals who are following this tenet or want to keep the society at this way.
Right.
The problem comes from when somebody else who may disagree in part or in full of that tenet, but still just wants to live in that community because they like the community, schools are nice, the job that they want to do is there, and they are qualified to do that. They are following every other rule established within that community. They just live slightly different from how you live and from how the majority of people there live, at least publicly. And therein is the problem. But you've stated in your examples and your answers here that, okay, they get to live here, he gets to do this, but just don't do it in my face. Typically, that won't happen. Typically, that will not happen. But if somebody is in your face intentionally trying to drive you crazy, I will be one of the first people in the front of the line to say, dude, that is wrong, stop it. Because he's not doing that in your face. Don't do it to him. That's I guess that's where we're coming from with it, and that's where we're saying as a country, as a society, we should be at this baseline where if we don't agree with it, at least respect you and your beliefs, so long as it doesn't suppress or oppress anybody, and vice versa.
Fair enough. I like it. I agree with you guys that freedom of choice, legally speaking, everything should be legal. Just don't take Christian ceremonies and force it on, all the crossing over stuff. I agree. People should be able to do what they want, where they want. I just don't want to lose my community. That's all.
I think you'll find, and maybe history will be the ultimate teller of this, but I think you'll find that the less oppression that you have in a society, the more robust your community becomes. So that even if you don't agree with every aspect of that society, you'll find that your local community is stronger because everybody else inside and outside of your community is respected. And so even if you don't agree with somebody else's lifestyle choices, they are still helping your community out and vice versa, whether directly or indirectly.
Right.
And I think that's the bottom line of what this country is founded upon.
And I do agree with you guys that that lady, if she doesn't like her job position anymore, the rules of it, I understand her freaking out because the rules changed out from under her, but she should step down and let somebody else do it because it's a government position, not a church. So I agree with you guys on that too.
It's sad that we would have somebody of that extreme then coming around and painting other people in a negative light who just so happen to share the overall label of being a Christian. Because then now you're going to have people who aren't Christians going to look at it, well, this is your example of Christianity? Yeah.
I think part of what they're doing is trying to make a point to the government that, hey, maybe you guys are overstepping your boundaries. You know, they're fearful of the government. You know, they're just trying to, hey, we're Christian. Don't forget, we live here too. You know, I don't know. They're just trying to make a stand.
I from the other side of it, I don't see that as being a problem at all. But that's just my opinion of it. If anything else, there's more strength within politics and people who are governing us because of their Christian faith. To the point that there are laws in there that if you are a non-believer, if you do not believe in God, you do not swear by it, you cannot run for public office, even though it's against the Constitution. And that's where we have something that comes up in here in the federal courts, and in this case, the Supreme Court, who will strike down those type of rulings that say, oh, if you are a person of Muslim faith or a person who is an atheist or agnostic or any other, or Buddhist, if you're running for public office and you were told, nope, you can't do this, you're denied, nope, whoa, hold on a second. They have to go through the entire process of going all the way up the legal chain, up to the Supreme Court, for them to say, nope, that law is unconstitutional, because now you're attempting to impose some religion on a government function, and that is unconstitutional.
Right, one religion over another.
Right.
That's wrong.
And that's to prevent the pendulum from going one way or the other, because today's Christianity and laws could become tomorrow's Sharia law.
Right. I totally see that.
No.
Cool.
I thank you all for hopping on this and having this nice, frank discussion. And honestly, I think a lot of people on all sides can learn that you can have a hard discussion like this and still be civil with each other and still enjoy each other's company at the end of the day. And even if it's something where you may not have a clear-cut answer on everything, you know, we can have a discussion and say, look, you know, let's work this out somehow. Because if we don't, we're going to end up tearing ourselves apart and somebody else will come in and step all over us.
Totally agree. And I really enjoy talking with you guys. You are
likewise. Yeah, all the time, man. All the time.
Different opinions and not cussing each other out or nothing.
Exactly. We were respectful of each other's opinions and beliefs, and addressed things that we saw as differences of opinion and discussed it. I mean, I don't think we were hostile at all.
No, please go after the pork with hostility.
You know what?
Yeah, okay.
Take it out on
a snowflake.
Take it out of the crystalline entity. There you go.
Right.
Don't forget to crit, right? Dundo's words. I'll never forget that.
All right, everybody, have a good night. Thanks for listening and tuning into the show, The Crazy Hour, where we dealt with religion, business, and government. Thank you all. Have a good night.
Good night.
Noit.